Welcome to Level 1 of 100 Paradoxes. Let's start with a simple, yet mind-bending question. In a small, quiet village, there lives a barber who shaves only those people who do not shave themselves. This seems simple enough, doesn't it? The barber has a steady business, and the villagers are content. But now, let's ask the question that has puzzled philosophers for generations. Who shaves the barber? If the barber shaves himself, then he belongs to the group of people who shave themselves. But our rule states that the barber only shaves people who don't shave themselves, so he cannot shave himself. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he belongs to the group of people who don't shave themselves. And according to our rule, the barber must shave him, but the barber is himself. This circular reasoning creates an impossible situation. The barber cannot both shave and not shave himself simultaneously, yet our simple rule demands both. This paradox reveals how seemingly logical statements can contain hidden contradictions that unravel when we examine them closely. As you drift deeper into thought, consider how many everyday assumptions might contain similar hidden impossibilities. And that's Level 1. Welcome to Level 2 of 100 Paradoxes. This one is deceptively simple but incredibly profound. It's called the liar paradox. Picture yourself looking at a piece of paper with a single sentence written on it. This statement is false. Read it slowly. Think about what it means. If the statement is true, then it must be false, as it claims to be. But if it's false, then it's telling the truth about being false, which would make it true. This ancient paradox has troubled logicians for over 2,000 years. It's like a mirror reflecting itself infinitely, creating an endless loop of contradictory meanings. The statement cannot be simply true or false. It exists in a strange liminal space between truth and falsehood. Imagine a world where every statement you encountered was like this one, where truth became elusive and slippery. The liar paradox shows us that language itself can create impossible situations, trapping us in webs of circular logic. As your mind relaxes, let this impossibility wash over you like a gentle wave of confusion that somehow feels peaceful. And that's Level 2. If you think this paradox is tricky, just wait. Things are only going to get weirder. Welcome to Level 3 of 100 Paradoxes. This one comes from ancient Greece and challenges our understanding of motion and time. It's called Zeno's Achilles and the Tortoise Paradox. Imagine a race where the swift-footed Achilles decides to race a slow tortoise. Being a fair sport, Achilles gives the tortoise a head start. Logic tells us that Achilles will easily overtake the tortoise, but the philosopher Zeno presents a puzzling argument. Before Achilles can overtake the tortoise, he must first reach the point where the tortoise started. But by the time Achilles reaches that point, the tortoise has moved a little further ahead. Now Achilles must reach this new point, but again, by the time he gets there, the tortoise has moved a bit more. This process continues infinitely. Achilles must always reach where the tortoise was, never where it is. According to this logic, Achilles can never actually overtake the tortoise, despite being faster. The paradox arises from dividing motion into infinite smaller parts, each requiring time to complete. While mathematics has since resolved this paradox through the concept of convergent infinite series, the puzzle remains beautiful in its ability to make the impossible seem logical. Let your mind race alongside Achilles, forever chasing, forever falling behind, in an endless pursuit that somehow brings peace. Welcome to Level 4 of 100 Paradoxes. This one is called the unexpected hanging paradox, and it messes with our understanding of logic and predictions. Imagine a judge sentences a prisoner to be hanged on one of the 5 weekdays of the coming week. The hanging will be unexpected, the judge declares. You will not know which day it will occur until the executioner arrives at your cell. The prisoner, being clever, begins to reason. The hanging cannot be on Friday, because if I'm still alive Thursday night, I'll know with certainty that Friday is the day. It wouldn't be unexpected, and if Friday is ruled out, then Thursday is the last possible day. So if I'm alive Wednesday night, I'll expect Thursday, ruling out Thursday too. Continuing this logic, the prisoner eliminates Wednesday, then Tuesday, then Monday. Satisfied that the hanging cannot occur at all, the prisoner relaxes. Then, on Wednesday, the executioner arrives unexpectedly. The prisoner is genuinely surprised. The hanging was indeed unexpected. This paradox plays with our understanding of knowledge, expectation, and logical deduction. The prisoner's perfect logic led to a perfectly wrong conclusion. Sometimes, the very act of trying to predict the unpredictable makes it possible again. As you settle into sleep, consider how the elimination of possibilities can paradoxically create new ones. Welcome to level 5 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Crocodile paradox. It's all about logic. Imagine along the muddy banks of an ancient river, a crocodile snatches a child. The desperate mother pleads for her child's return. The crocodile, being unusually philosophical, makes an offer. I will return your child if you can correctly guess what I will do. The mother thinks carefully and responds, You will not return my child. Now, the crocodile faces an impossible dilemma. If the mother is correct, if the crocodile indeed will not return the child, then her guess is right, and according to the agreement, the crocodile must return the child. But returning the child would make her guess incorrect. If the mother is wrong, if the crocodile would return the child, then her guess is incorrect, and the crocodile should not return the child, making her guess correct after all. The crocodile finds itself trapped in logical quicksand, unable to move forward or backward. Like many paradoxes, this reveals the strange loops that can emerge when self-reference meets conditional logic. The mother's clever answer creates a situation where any action becomes self-contradictory. Let this impossible scenario flow through your mind, like the ancient river itself, carrying you toward peaceful sleep. Welcome to level 6 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Ship of Theseus paradox, and it challenges our idea of identity and change. Imagine an ancient ship in Athens belonging to legendary hero Theseus, preserved as a monument to his great deeds. Over the years, the wooden planks begin to rot and are replaced, one by one, with new timber. The mast is renewed, the sails replaced, the ropes restrung. Eventually, every single piece of the original ship has been replaced. Is this still the ship of Theseus? Most would say yes, after all, it was carefully maintained, each piece replaced thoughtfully to preserve the whole. But now imagine that someone collected all the original pieces as they were removed and rebuilt the ship exactly as it once was. Which ship is the true ship of Theseus? This paradox extends beyond ships to our very sense of identity. Your body replaces its cells continuously. Within 7 years, nearly every cell in your body is new. Are you the same person you were 7 years ago? What makes you, your physical form, your memories, your continuity of experience? The ship of Theseus reveals the fluid nature of identity and existence. We are all ships being rebuilt, plank by plank, moment by moment, somehow remaining ourselves while constantly changing. As you drift towards sleep, feel your own cells renewing, your thoughts flowing like replaced planks in the ship of your consciousness. Welcome to level 7 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the grandfather paradox, and it's one of the most famous paradoxes in time travel. Step into a world where time travel is possible. A young inventor builds a time machine and decides to travel back in time to meet their grandfather as a young man. But something goes wrong. Through accident or design, the time traveler prevents their grandfather from meeting their grandmother. If the grandparents never meet, they never have children. If they never have children, the time traveler's parents are never born. If the parent is never born, the time traveler is never born. If the time traveler is never born, they cannot travel back in time to prevent the meeting. If they don't prevent the meeting, the grandfather meets the grandmother, and the time traveler is born after all. This creates a causality loop where the effect prevents its own cause, which then allows the effect to occur again. It's like a temporal Ouroboros, a snake of time eating its own tail. The paradox has spawned countless theories parallel universes, self-correcting timelines, the impossibility of time travel itself. As you contemplate this temporal puzzle, imagine time not as a straight line, but as a web, with threads crossing and recrossing in impossible patterns. Let the complexity of causation lull you into dreams where past and future dance together in ways that defy logic, but somehow feel perfectly natural. Welcome to level 8 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Sorites paradox, also known as the paradox of the heap, and it challenges the way we define vague concepts. Image before you stands a large heap of sand containing perhaps 10,000 grains. Everyone would agree this is certainly a heap. Now, remove 1 grain of sand. Is it still a heap? Of course. Remove another grain. Still a heap. Continue this process, grain by grain. At what point does the heap cease to be a heap? When you remove the 1,000th grain? The 100th? The 10th? It seems that removing a single grain of sand cannot be the difference between a heap and not a heap. Yet somewhere in this process, the heap disappears. This paradox applies to many aspects of life. When does day become night? When does a child become an adult? When does a democracy become a dictatorship? We use these categories constantly, yet they resist precise definition. The boundaries of our concepts are often far more blurry than we assume. The Sorites paradox suggests that much of reality exists in shades of grey rather than black and white. Categories blend into each other like colours in a sunset, distinct yet continuous. As you feel yourself transitioning from wakefulness to sleep, notice how there's no precise moment when you cross the threshold, just a gentle gradient into dreams. Welcome to level 9 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Omnipotence paradox, and it challenges the very idea of unlimited power. Imagine the idea of unlimited power, the ability to do anything. Can an omnipotent being create a stone so heavy that they cannot lift it? This simple question creates a logical trap with no escape. If the omnipotent being can create such a stone, then there exists something they cannot do, lift the stone. This would mean they are not omnipotent. If they cannot create such a stone, then there's something they cannot do, create the unliftable stone. Again, they would not be omnipotent. This paradox reveals the strange territory where logic meets the infinite. Perhaps omnipotence itself is an incoherent concept, or perhaps logic breaks down when applied to unlimited power. Some philosophers argue that omnipotence means the power to do anything that's logically possible, which would exclude self-contradictory actions like creating unliftable stones. The paradox invites us to question our understanding of power, possibility, and the limits of logic itself. As you relax, imagine a realm beyond the constraints of logic, where contradictions coexist peacefully and impossibilities feel perfectly natural. Welcome to level 10 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Raven paradox, and it challenges the way we think about evidence and logic. To test the statement, all ravens are black, scientists observe ravens, looking for counterexamples. Each black raven they find seems to confirm the statement. This approach makes intuitive sense observe ravens to learn about ravens. But logically, all ravens are black is equivalent to all non-black things are non-ravens. To confirm this statement, we could observe non-black things and check that they're not ravens. A red apple is non-black and non-raven, so it should confirm our original statement about ravens. This creates the absurd conclusion that observing a red apple provides evidence that all ravens are black. The paradox highlights a disconnect between logical equivalence and intuitive reasoning. Two statements can be logically identical, yet feel completely different to our minds. The Raven paradox shows how the formal rules of logic can lead to conclusions that violate our intuitions about evidence and confirmation. It reminds us that human reasoning evolved for practical survival, not mathematical precision. Sometimes, our gut feelings about evidence conflict with logical analysis, creating puzzles that have no satisfying resolution. As you drift towards sleep, imagine ravens and red apples existing in a strange logical space where each confirms truths about the other, connected by invisible threads of logical equivalence. Welcome to level 11 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Preface paradox. An author writes a comprehensive book on a complex subject, carefully researching each chapter and believing every statement they include. Yet in the preface, being humble and realistic, they write, "This book undoubtedly contains some errors, and I apologize in advance for any mistakes." The author genuinely believes both that each individual claim in the book is true and that the book as a whole contains falsehoods. This seems rational complex works almost always contain some errors, even when each part seems correct. Yet the author simultaneously believes contradictory things, that every statement is true and that some statements are false. This paradox reflects a common human experience. We often believe each of our individual beliefs, while acknowledging that some of them must be wrong. A scientist might believe each theory they accept while knowing that science progresses by overturning previous beliefs. A person might trust each of their memories while recognizing that memory is fallible. The Preface paradox reveals the tension between our specific, confident beliefs and our general intellectual humility. It shows how rationality itself can lead to contradictory positions when applied at different levels of abstraction. Let this comfortable contradiction settle over you like a soft blanket of uncertainty. Welcome to level 12 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the court. A law student makes a deal with their teacher. They will pay for their education only after winning their first case in court. The student graduates but decides never to practice law, thus avoiding payment. Frustrated, the teacher sues the student for the tuition. Now, the paradox unfolds. If the teacher wins the lawsuit, the student must pay, but this means the student has won their first case, defending against the lawsuit, so according to their agreement, they shouldn't have to pay. If the student wins the lawsuit, they don't have to pay the teacher, but this means they've won their first case, so according to their agreement, they should pay. Each possible outcome contradicts itself. The very act of going to court creates a situation where the contract becomes self-defeating. The lawsuit simultaneously determines and undermines its own outcome. This ancient paradox attributed to the Greek sophist Protagoras, illustrates how contractual logic can create impossible situations. It shows that even carefully crafted agreements can contain hidden contradictions that emerge only under specific circumstances. As you contemplate this legal labyrinth, let the impossibility of resolution guide you toward peaceful sleep. Welcome to level 13 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the lottery paradox. Consider a fair lottery with 1 million tickets, where exactly one ticket will win. It's rational to believe that any particular ticket, say ticket number 847,392, will lose. The probability is 999 out of 100. Similarly, it's rational to believe that ticket 12, 784 will lose, and ticket 555 will lose, and so on. If it's rational to believe that each individual ticket will lose, then it seems rational to believe that all tickets will lose. But this contradicts our knowledge that exactly one ticket must win. We have a rational belief in something we know to be false. This paradox emerges from the gap between statistical reasoning and logical certainty. Each individual belief has strong probabilistic support, but their conjunction leads to impossibility. It reveals how our standards for rational belief can lead us astray when applied broadly. The lottery paradox connects to many real-world situations. We might reasonably believe that each smoker we know won't develop lung cancer, since most don't, while knowing that some smokers will. We might believe each stock we own won't crash tomorrow, while knowing that some stocks will crash. As your mind processes this probabilistic puzzle, imagine floating in a space between certainty and doubt, where individual beliefs and collective knowledge exist in peaceful tension. Welcome to level 14 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the two envelopes paradox. Someone presents you with two sealed envelopes, explaining that one contains twice as much money as the other. You choose an envelope and open it, finding 100. Now you're offered a chance to switch to the other envelope. You reason. The other envelope contains either 50 or 200. If it contains 50, I lose 50 by switching. If it contains 200, I gain 100 by switching. The expected value of switching is 50 plus 100 choose 2 equals 25. I should switch. But wait, this same reasoning applies no matter what amount you found in your envelope. Whether you found 10, 100 or 1000, the expected value calculation always favors switching. This suggests you should always switch, which seems absurd. The paradox arises from applying probability theory inappropriately. The flaw lies in assuming equal probabilities for the two possibilities, when, in fact, the probability depends on the unknown distribution of the amounts. The envelope amounts aren't chosen randomly from an infinite range, they're two specific values. This paradox illustrates how mathematical reasoning can lead us astray when we misapply probability theory. It shows the importance of understanding the assumptions underlying our calculations. Let this mathematical mystery dissolve into dreams where logic and intuition find harmony. Welcome to level 15 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Russell's paradox. In a town, there's a barber who shaves all, and only those people who do not shave themselves. No, wait, we've heard this before. But Russell's paradox goes deeper, threatening the very foundations of mathematics. Consider the set of all sets that do not contain themselves as members. Most sets don't contain themselves. The set of all cats is not itself a cat. the set of all red things is not red. So, this set of non-self-containing sets seems well defined. Now ask, does this set contain itself? If it contains itself, then it belongs to the category of sets that contain themselves, so it shouldn't be in our set of non-self-containing sets. If it doesn't contain itself, then it belongs to the category of sets that don't contain themselves, so it should be in our set. This paradox shattered the foundations of naive set theory in mathematics. It showed that unrestricted set formation leads to contradictions. The discovery forced mathematicians to develop more careful axioms for set theory, fundamentally changing how mathematics approaches the infinite. Russell's paradox reveals how self-reference can create logical explosions, even in pure mathematics. It reminds us that even our most basic mathematical intuitions can harbour contradictions. As you drift towards sleep, imagine sets within sets within sets, each containing and being contained in patterns that somehow transcend contradiction. Welcome to level 16 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the potato paradox. A farmer harvests potatoes that are 99% water by weight. The farmer has 100 pounds of potatoes and leaves them in the sun to dry. After drying, the potatoes are 98% water by weight. How much do the potatoes weigh now? Most people intuitively guess around 99 pounds. After all, losing just 1% of water content shouldn't change the weight dramatically. But let's calculate carefully. Originally, 100 pounds total, 99% water, 99 pounds water, 1 pound solid matter. After drying, 98% water, 2% solid matter. The solid matter remains constant at 1 pound. If 1 pound represents 2% of the total weight, then the total weight is 50 pounds. The potatoes lost half their weight by changing from 99% to 98% water content. This counterintuitive result occurs because we're changing the percentage of a large component. When water content drops from 99% to 98%, the solid matter doubles from 1% to 2% of the total, requiring the total weight to halve. The potato paradox illustrates how our intuitions about percentages can mislead us. Small changes in large percentages can have dramatic effects. It reveals the hidden mathematics in everyday situations and shows how numbers can surprise us even in simple scenarios. Let this mathematical mystery guide you toward dreams, where percentages and pounds dance together in impossible ways. Welcome to level 17 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the arrow paradox. Zeno strikes again with another puzzle about motion. Consider an arrow in flight. At any given instant, the arrow occupies a specific position in space. It has a definite location. But if the arrow occupies a specific position at each instant, when does it move? At instant 1, the arrow is at position A. At instant 2, it's at position B. But during each individual instant, the arrow isn't moving, it's simply at a location. Motion seems to require change over time, but time is composed of individual instants during which nothing changes. This paradox suggests that motion is impossible. The arrow is stationary at every instant, so how can it be moving? Yet we clearly see arrows fly through the air. The paradox arises from treating time as composed of discrete, indivisible moments during which nothing can happen. Modern mathematics resolves this through calculus, defining motion as the instantaneous rate of change of position. Motion becomes not a thing the arrow does at an instant, but a property that emerges from comparing infinitely close instants. The arrow has velocity at each instant, even though it occupies a definite position. The arrow paradox reveals the subtle nature of continuous change and the power of mathematical abstraction to resolve ancient puzzles. As you settle into stillness, contemplate the paradox of your own motion through time always present at each moment, yet somehow travelling from past to future. Welcome to level 18 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the whole paradox. What exactly is a whole? This seems like a simple question, but it opens a philosophical abyss. A whole appears to be something, yet it's defined by the absence of something else. A hole in a piece of cheese exists where cheese is not. If holes are nothing, how can we count them? We can say there are 3 holes in a piece of Swiss cheese. We can point to them, measure them, even plug them. Holes seem to have properties: size, shape, location. But how can nothing have properties? If holes are something, what are they made of? A hole in the ground isn't made of dirt, it's the absence of dirt. A hole in the air, like a bubble underwater, isn't made of air, it's where air isn't. Holes seem to exist in a strange category between something and nothing. The problem becomes more complex when we consider whether holes are parts of objects or separate entities. Is the hole part of the cheese, or is it a distinct thing that happens to be surrounded by cheese? Can holes exist independently, or do they require host objects? This paradox touches on fundamental questions about existence, identity, and the relationship between objects and space. It shows how even the simplest concepts can become philosophically problematic when examined closely. Let this contemplation of nothing and something blur together as you drift towards sleep. Welcome to level 19 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Moore's paradox. Consider these 2 statements: "It's raining outside" and "I don't believe it's raining outside." Neither statement is self-contradictory on its own. It might indeed be raining, and you might indeed not believe it's raining. Perhaps you haven't looked outside. Yet saying both together creates an odd paradox. "It's raining outside, but I don't believe it's raining outside" sounds absurd, even though it's logically possible. The paradox isn't about truth or falsehood. Both parts of the statement could be true. The problem is with assertion itself. When you assert something, you typically express your belief in it. Saying, "It's raining," normally implies you believe it's raining. So the full statement becomes self-defeating. You're expressing belief in something while simultaneously denying that belief. This paradox reveals the complex relationship between belief, assertion, and truth. It shows how the act of speaking involves more than just stating facts. It involves expressing our mental states. The paradox highlights the difference between what could be true and what we can coherently assert. Moore's paradox illuminates the subtle pragmatics of language and the relationship between our inner mental lives and our outward expressions. As you consider this puzzle of belief and expression, let the distinction between thinking and speaking dissolve into peaceful sleep. Welcome to level 20 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the twin paradox, and it's a mind-bending problem of Einstein's relativity that challenges our idea of time. In the realm of Einstein's relativity, imagine identical twins own an astronaut, the other staying on Earth. The astronaut travels to a distant star at nearly the speed of light. According to relativity, time passes more slowly for objects moving at high speeds relative to an observer. From Earth's perspective, the astronaut's clocks run slowly, and the astronaut ages slowly. But from the astronaut's perspective, Earth is the one moving away at high speed, so Earth's clocks should run slowly. Each twin should observe the other aging more slowly. When the astronaut returns to Earth, who has aged more? The symmetry seems to suggest they should have aged equally, but this contradicts the prediction that the travelling twin ages less. This apparent contradiction is the twin paradox. The resolution lies in recognizing that the situation isn't perfectly symmetric. The astronaut must accelerate to leave Earth, decelerate at the distant star, accelerate back toward Earth, and decelerate upon arrival. These periods of acceleration break the symmetry and resolve the paradox the travelling twin indeed returns younger. The twin paradox illustrates how relativity challenges our intuitive understanding of time and space. It shows that time itself is relative, flowing differently for different observers. As you contemplate this temporal puzzle, imagine time stretching and compressing like a cosmic accordion, carrying you gently toward dreams. Welcome to level 21 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of self-amendment, and it raises a strange question about rules, laws, and logic. Imagine a constitution contains a clause stating, "This constitution cannot be amended." This creates a logical puzzle. If the constitution truly cannot be amended, then this clause itself is permanent and unchangeable. But what if people want to amend the constitution to allow amendments? To change the no amendments clause, they would need to amend the constitution, but the constitution forbids amendments. They're trapped in a logical loop. They cannot change the rule that prevents change without first changing the rule that prevents change. Some argue that such a clause is meaningless. Any rule against self-amendment must be amenable, or else the Constitution becomes a permanent tyranny of the past over the future. Others argue that such clauses are possible and create permanent constitutional commitments. This paradox extends beyond law to any system of rules that tries to govern its own modification. Can a rule validly forbid its own change? The question touches on fundamental issues of authority, sovereignty, and the relationship between present and future generations. The paradox of self-amendment reveals the strange reflexive problems that arise when rules attempt to regulate themselves. It shows how self-reference creates logical tangles even in practical governance. Let this constitutional conundrum guide you toward dreams where rules and exceptions dance in eternal circles. Welcome to level 22 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Abilene paradox, and it reveals how groups can make decisions that nobody actually wants. A family sits on a hot porch in Texas, miserable in the heat. The father suggests driving to Abilene for dinner. The mother agrees, thinking everyone else wants to go. The daughter agrees, not wanting to disappoint. The son agrees, assuming the others are enthusiastic. They drive through the desert heat to Abilene, have a mediocre meal, and return exhausted. Only then does each family member reveal the truth. None of them wanted to go to Abilene. Each agreed only because they thought the others wanted to go. This paradox illustrates how groups can collectively choose actions that no individual member wants. It occurs when people mistake their perception of others' preferences for reality, leading to decisions that satisfy no one. The group acts against its collective interest due to miscommunication and false assumptions about consensus. The Abilene paradox is common in organizations, relationships, and social groups. Committees approve projects no one supports, friends choose restaurants no one prefers, and societies pursue policies no one truly wants. The paradox shows how the desire to maintain harmony can actually create collective misery. This social paradox reveals the complexity of group decision-making and the importance of honest communication. Sometimes, the greatest harmony comes from acknowledging disagreement rather than assuming consensus. As you drift towards sleep, imagine all the Abilenes we've travelled to in life and the comfort of finally staying home. Welcome to level 23 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of tolerance, and it's about how a truly tolerant society can allow intolerance. A tolerant society values tolerance as a fundamental principle, accepting diverse viewpoints and ways of life. But what should a tolerant society do when faced with intolerant groups that seek to eliminate tolerance itself? Should tolerance extend to intolerance? If a tolerant society tolerates intolerant movements, it risks allowing those movements to grow powerful enough to destroy tolerance altogether. The tolerant society might enable its own destruction through its commitment to tolerance. But if a tolerant society suppresses intolerant movements, it becomes intolerant itself, violating its own foundational principle. The act of defending tolerance requires abandoning tolerance. This creates a paradox with no clean resolution. Some argue for repressive tolerance, intolerance, toward movements that threaten tolerance. Others argue for absolute tolerance, accepting even the risk of self-destruction rather than compromising principles. The paradox of tolerance illustrates the challenges facing liberal democracies and open societies. It shows how even our most cherished values can contain internal contradictions when pushed to their logical limits. The paradox forces us to grapple with the boundaries of our principles and the relationship between ideals and survival. As you contemplate this social puzzle, consider how tolerance and intolerance might coexist in the same way that sleep and wakefulness meet at the boundary of consciousness. Welcome to level 24 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Buridan's donkey, and it's about decision-making, free will, and why too much logic can lead to inaction. A perfectly rational donkey stands equidistant between two identical bales of hay. The donkey is equally hungry and equally attracted to both bales. Being perfectly rational, the donkey cannot choose between them. There's no logical reason to prefer one over the other. Unable to decide, the donkey stands paralyzed between the two options and eventually starves to death, despite being surrounded by food. The donkey's perfect rationality becomes its downfall, preventing action when action is necessary for survival. This medieval thought experiment highlights the limitations of pure rationality. In situations with equally good options, rational analysis provides no guidance. Sometimes, making any choice is better than making no choice, even if we cannot rationally justify the selection. The paradox applies to many human situations. When faced with equally attractive job offers, college choices, or life partners, perfect rational analysis might leave us paralyzed. Sometimes, we need to embrace irrationality or randomness to move forward. Buridan's donkey reveals the gap between rational decision theory and practical life. It shows that reason alone is insufficient for navigating a complex world filled with difficult choices. Sometimes the best decision is simply to make a decision. Let this patient donkey's dilemma remind you that rest itself is a choice, and perhaps not one that requires rational justifications, just the wisdom to know when paralysis must give way to peace. Welcome to level 25 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of free will, and it challenges whether we truly have the ability to make choices. Do we have free will, or are our actions determined by prior causes? This ancient question creates a paradox with troubling implications either way. If our actions are determined by previous events, brain states, and natural laws, then we don't truly choose. We simply follow the inevitable path laid out by causation. But if our actions aren't determined by prior causes, then they're random, occurring without reason or connection to our beliefs and desires. Random actions don't seem freely chosen either. They're just unpredictable events that happen to occur in our brains. Free will seems to require that our actions be both caused by our own reasons and desires, not random, and not determined by forces beyond our control, not predetermined. But this middle ground between randomness and determinism is difficult to define or locate. The paradox deepens when we consider moral responsibility. If our actions are determined, can we be truly blameworthy or praiseworthy? If they're random, can we take credit or blame? Either way, the foundations of ethics seem to crumble. Yet, we cannot help but experience ourselves as free agents, making choices. The feeling of freedom is so fundamental to human experience that we continue to deliberate, choose, and hold others responsible, regardless of philosophical puzzles. The paradox of free will shows how our deepest experiences might be inconsistent with our best theories about reality. As you feel your control over consciousness slipping away into sleep, notice how this loss of agency feels not like a problem to be solved, but like a gift to be received. Welcome to level 26 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the barber pole. Outside an old-fashioned barber shop, a pole spins with helical stripes spiraling around it. The stripes appear to move upward along the pole, yet they never reach the top and disappear. They seem to flow continuously upward while somehow remaining in the same place. This visual paradox occurs because our brains interpret the rotating spiral as upward motion. Each stripe appears to climb the pole, but as one stripe reaches the top, another identical stripe appears at the bottom. The motion is both real and illusory. The stripes do move, but not in the direction we perceive. The barber pole paradox extends beyond visual perception to many aspects of human experience. We often see patterns and movements that don't correspond to physical reality. Our brains construct coherent narratives from ambiguous sensory information, sometimes creating illusions of motion, progress, or direction. Consider how many aspects of life resemble the barber pole seeming to move forward, while actually cycling in place, careers that feel like advancement, while repeating familiar patterns. Relationships that seem to progress, while revisiting the same dynamics. Personal growth that feels linear, while actually spiraling through similar themes. The paradox of the barber pole reminds us that perception and reality often diverge, and that movement can take forms our minds struggle to interpret correctly. As you watch the stripes of consciousness spiral towards sleep, notice how you can simultaneously move forward in time while returning to the familiar territory of rest. Welcome to level 27 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the nocebo effect paradox. The placebo effect is well-known people improve when they believe they're receiving treatment, even if the treatment is fake. Less familiar is its dark twin, the nocebo effect, where people experience harm when they believe they're being harmed, even when the supposed cause is harmless. Here's the paradox. Telling people about the nocebo effect can create nocebo effects. If someone warns you that a harmless substance might cause headaches in some people due to the nocebo effect, this warning itself might cause you to develop headaches. The knowledge that you might experience symptoms can cause those very symptoms. This creates an ethical dilemma for researchers and doctors. Should they warn people about potential nocebo effects to help them understand their experiences? But warning them might cause the effects they're trying to prevent. Should they remain silent? But then people might suffer unnecessarily from effects they don't understand. The paradox deepens when we consider informed consent in medical research. Researchers must tell participants about potential side effects, but listing possible nocebo effects might cause those effects. The very act of being thorough and ethical might cause harm. The nocebo effect paradox reveals the strange power of expectation and belief in shaping physical reality. It shows how knowledge itself can be a form of intervention, changing the very thing it seeks to understand. As you settle towards sleep, let go of expectations about how you should feel, allowing experience to unfold without the influence of anticipation. Welcome to level 28 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the prisoner's dilemma. This paradox challenges our understanding of rational cooperation and self-interest in strategic decision-making. Imagine two prisoners, arrested for a crime and held in separate cells, unable to communicate. Each prisoner faces a choice: confess and betray their partner, or remain silent and cooperate with them. The prosecutor offers each prisoner the same deal. If you confess and your partner remains silent, you go free while they serve 10 years. If both confess, you each serve 5 years. If both remain silent, you each serve only 1 year. Here's where the paradox emerges. Rational self-interest suggests each prisoner should confess, since confession always leads to a better personal outcome regardless of what the other does. If your partner confesses, you're better off confessing too, 5 years instead of 10. If your partner stays silent, you're still better off confessing freedom instead of 1 year. Yet, when both prisoners follow this rational logic, they both confess and receive 5 years each, a worse outcome than if they had both cooperated and stayed silent for just 1 year each. This paradox reveals the fundamental tension between individual rationality and collective benefit. It shows how two perfectly rational actors can reach a suboptimal outcome when they can't trust each other to cooperate. The dilemma extends far beyond prison cells, appearing in arms races, environmental policy, trade negotiations, and countless daily interactions where short-term self-interest conflicts with long-term mutual benefit. The paradox becomes even more intriguing when we consider repeated interactions. In ongoing relationships, the threat of future retaliation can sustain cooperation where one-shot interactions fail. This insight has profound implications for understanding everything from international diplomacy to workplace dynamics, showing how the shadow of the future can transform competitive scenarios into cooperative ones. Welcome to level 29 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Newcomb's paradox. This paradox challenges our fundamental assumptions about free will, causation, and rational decision-making when faced with perfect prediction. Picture this scenario. An alien predictor with perfect accuracy presents you with two boxes. Box A contains 1, 0, and is transparent. You can see the money inside. Box B is opaque and contains either 1 million or nothing. The predictor has already decided what to put in box B based on their prediction of your choice. If they predicted you would take both boxes, box B is empty. If they predicted you would take only box B, it contains 1 million. You now face a choice: take both boxes or take only box B. The predictor has never been wrong in their predictions across thousands of previous scenarios. Classical decision theory suggests you should take both boxes. After all, the contents are already determined, so you might as well maximize your gain. Yet statistical evidence overwhelmingly shows that one boxers walk away with 2 box, 1 million, while 2 boxers leave with only 1, 0. This paradox creates a fundamental conflict between two types of reasoning. Causal decision theory says your current choice cannot influence what's already in the boxes, so taking both maximizes your expected outcome. Evidential decision theory suggests that your choice provides evidence about what the predictor placed in the boxes, so taking only box B is rational. The deeper question lurks beneath the surface. If the predictor is truly infallible, do you actually have free will to choose? If your choice is perfectly predictable, are you truly choosing, or merely following a predetermined path? This paradox forces us to confront whether our sense of agency is compatible with a deterministic universe where our actions can be perfectly foreseen. Welcome to level 30 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the birthday paradox. This paradox challenges our intuitive understanding of probability and coincidence in everyday situations. In a room with just 23 people, there's a greater than 50% chance that 2 people share the same birthday. This seems impossible at first glance. With 365 days in a year, surely you'd need far more people for such a coincidence to be likely. Our intuition fails us because we think about the probability of someone sharing our specific birthday, rather than any 2 people sharing any birthday. The mathematics reveals why our intuition misleads us. With 23 people, there are 253 possible pairs of individuals. Each pair has a 1/365 chance of sharing a birthday. When we calculate the probability that no 2 people share a birthday and subtract from 1, we get approximately 50.7% chance of at least one match. By the time we reach 50 people, the probability soars to over 97%. This paradox demonstrates how exponential growth in combinations can create surprising results. It's not about any specific birthday, but about the explosion of possible connections as group size increases. The same principle explains why coincidences feel miraculous yet occur regularly in a world of billions of people experiencing thousands of events daily. The unlikely becomes inevitable. The birthday paradox extends beyond party games into crucial areas like cryptography and computer science. Hash functions must account for birthday attacks, where collisions become probable much sooner than expected. In databases, duplicate detection algorithms must consider the birthday paradox when estimating collision rates. Even in DNA testing and forensic science, the principle helps determine how many genetic markers are needed to ensure uniqueness with high confidence. This paradox reminds us that human intuition about probability often fails when dealing with large numbers of interactions. What seems impossibly coincidental is often mathematically predictable, while what seems certain can be surprisingly fragile. Welcome to level 31 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Quine's paradox. This paradox challenges our understanding of self-reference and truth in language and logic. Consider the sentence, yields falsehood when preceded by its quotation. Yields falsehood when preceded by its quotation. This sentence describes its own behavior. It claims that when you take the quoted phrase and put it before itself, the result is false. But this sentence is itself exactly what it describes. The quoted phrase preceded by its quotation. If the sentence is true, then it accurately describes what happens when the quoted phrase precedes its quotation, which means the resulting sentence itself should be false. But if it's false, then its description is incorrect, which would mean the resulting sentence should be true. We're trapped in a logical loop where the sentence cannot consistently be either true or false. This paradox, created by philosopher Willard Van Orman Quine, demonstrates the fundamental problems that arise with self-referential statements in formal logic. Unlike the liar paradox, which simply states, "This sentence is false," Quine's version is more subtle and technical, showing how self-reference can create contradictions even in seemingly innocent descriptive language. The paradox has profound implications for formal systems and computer science. It shows that any logical system powerful enough to talk about itself will contain statements that cannot be assigned truth values consistently. This connects to Gödel's incompleteness theorems and reveals fundamental limitations in our ability to create complete, consistent, formal systems. In programming, similar paradoxes arise with self-modifying code and recursive definitions. A program that attempts to determine its own behavior faces similar logical challenges. The paradox illustrates why perfect self-knowledge might be logically impossible. Any system attempting to fully describe itself encounters these recursive contradictions. Welcome to level 32 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the St. Petersburg paradox. This paradox challenges our understanding of expected value and rational decision-making in the face of infinite possibilities. Imagine a casino offers you a game where they flip a fair coin repeatedly until it lands heads. If heads appear on the first flip, you win 2. If it appears on the second flip, you win 4. Third flip, 8. The payout doubles with each additional flip required. The question is, how much should you be willing to pay to play this game? Mathematically, the expected value is infinite. There's a 1, 2 chance of winning, 2, a 1, 4 chance of winning, 4, a 1, 8 chance of winning, 8, and so on. Logic suggests you should pay any finite amount to play a game with infinite expected value. Yet no rational person would pay even 1, 0 for this game, let alone millions or billions. This reveals a fundamental flaw in using expected value alone for decision-making when infinite possibilities are involved. Various solutions have been proposed. Daniel Bernoulli suggested that utility diminishes with wealth. The marginal happiness from additional money decreases as you become richer. Others propose that people naturally discount very low probability events, or that the casino's finite resources cap the maximum possible payout. The paradox extends beyond gambling into investment theory, insurance, and risk management. It demonstrates why expected value calculations can lead to absurd conclusions when dealing with extreme scenarios. In real-world decision-making, factors like risk tolerance, diminishing returns, and practical constraints must temper pure mathematical expectations. Welcome to level 33 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Curry's paradox. This paradox challenges our understanding of conditional statements and logical implication in ways that can prove any statement, no matter how absurd. Consider this sentence. If this sentence is true, then Santa Claus exists. Let's call this sentence C. Now, let's analyze what happens when we try to determine if C is true or false. Assume C is true. If C is true, then the conditional statement, if this sentence is true, then Santa Claus exists, is correct. Since we've assumed C is true, the condition is met, so the consequence must follow, Santa Claus exists. So far, this seems consistent. Now, assume C is false. If C is false, then the conditional statement is false. But when is a conditional statement false? Only when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. For C to be false, this sentence is true would need to be true and Santa Claus exists would need to be false. But if this sentence is true, then C is true, contradicting our assumption that C is false. This means C cannot be false without contradiction. Therefore, C must be true. And if C is true, then Santa Claus exists. Using the same logic, we can prove that leprechauns exist, that 2 + 2 = 5, or any other absurd statement. Curry's paradox reveals fundamental problems with self-referential conditional statements in classical logic. Unlike other paradoxes that create contradictions, Curry's paradox seems to prove false statements without generating logical inconsistency. This makes it particularly dangerous for formal logical systems, as it can derive any conclusion from seemingly innocent premises. The paradox shows why mathematical logicians must be extremely careful about the rules they allow for self-reference and conditional reasoning. It demonstrates that our intuitive understanding of if-then statements can lead us astray when combined with self-reference. Welcome to level 34 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Hilbert's Grand Hotel. This paradox challenges our intuitive understanding of infinity and shows how infinite sets behave in counterintuitive ways. Imagine a hotel with infinitely many rooms, numbered 1, 2, 3, and so on forever. Every room is occupied, the hotel is completely full. Now, a new guest arrives and requests a room. In any normal hotel, you'd have to turn them away. But the clever manager of this infinite hotel has a solution. Ask every guest to move to the room numbered 1 higher than their current room. The guest in room 1 moves to room 2, the guest in room 2 moves to room 3, and so on. Now room 1 is empty for the new arrival. The paradox deepens. Suppose an infinite bus arrives with infinitely many new guests. Impossible to accommodate? Not at all. The manager asks each current guest in room N to move to room 1, doubling their room number. This leaves all odd-numbered rooms empty, and there are infinitely many odd numbers. The infinite bus guests can be assigned to rooms 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. Even more remarkably, imagine infinitely many buses arrive, each carrying infinitely many passengers. The manager can still accommodate everyone by using a systematic numbering scheme based on prime factorization or diagonal arguments. Each new guest gets a unique room number, despite the hotel being full to begin with. This paradox, created by mathematician David Hilbert, illustrates how infinity behaves unlike any finite quantity. In the infinite realm, full doesn't mean no more room, and adding 2 doesn't necessarily mean getting larger. The hotel demonstrates that infinite sets can be proper subsets of themselves, a counterintuitive property that distinguishes infinite from finite collections. The paradox has practical implications in mathematics, particularly in set theory and analysis. It helps explain why mathematicians must be careful when dealing with infinite processes, and why our finite intuitions often fail when extended to infinite domains. Welcome to level 35 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Bootstrap paradox. This paradox challenges our understanding of causation and the origin of information when time travel is involved. Imagine you travel back in time and give a young Shakespeare a complete collection of his plays, the very plays he will supposedly write in the future. Shakespeare, inspired by these works, copies them exactly and publishes them as his own. Years later, these become the classic texts you originally brought back in time. The question is, who really wrote Shakespeare's plays? This creates a closed causal loop where information appears to have no origin. The plays exist because you brought them back, but you only had them because Shakespeare wrote them, but Shakespeare only wrote them because you brought them back. The information bootstraps itself into existence without any apparent creator. The paradox extends beyond literature to any scenario where information or objects are passed backward through time. Suppose you travel back and teach Einstein his theory of relativity, which you learned from his work. Or imagine finding the plans for a time machine in an old book, building the machine, then travelling back to write those very plans in the book. Where did the knowledge originate? This paradox highlights fundamental questions about causation and information. In normal experience, every effect has a prior cause, and every piece of information has an original source. The bootstrap paradox suggests that in a universe with time travel, some information might exist without origin. It simply is, trapped in an eternal causal loop. Physicists debate whether such scenarios are possible, or if the universe has built-in mechanisms to prevent them. Some theories suggest that consistency requirements would make such paradoxes self-correcting, while others propose that information in causal loops must somehow have reduced content or increased entropy. The paradox forces us to reconsider our basic assumptions about causation, creation, and the flow of information through time. Welcome to level 36 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Simpson's paradox. This paradox challenges our understanding of statistics and correlation by showing how aggregate data can completely reverse the trends seen in subgroups. Consider a university accused of gender bias in admissions. Overall statistics show that 40% of male applicants are accepted, while only 30% of female applicants are accepted. Clear evidence of discrimination, right? But when we examine each department separately, we find that in every single department, women have equal or higher acceptance rates than men. How is this possible? The answer lies in application patterns. Women predominantly apply to highly competitive departments with low acceptance rates, like medical school with 5% acceptance, while men more often apply to less competitive departments with higher acceptance rates, like engineering with 60% acceptance. Even though women perform better within each department, their overall rate appears lower because they're competing in tougher pools. This paradox appears throughout statistics and research. A medication might be more effective than a placebo for both men and women separately, yet appear less effective overall. A baseball player might have a higher batting average than a competitor in both the first and second half of the season, yet have a lower average for the entire season. A hospital might have better survival rates than another hospital for both high-risk and low-risk patients, yet have a worse overall survival rate. Simpson's paradox reveals why statistical analysis requires careful consideration of confounding variables and why aggregate data can be misleading. It shows that correlation at one level can disappear or reverse at another level of analysis. This has profound implications for medical research, social policy, and business decision-making. The paradox teaches us to be skeptical of simple statistical comparisons and highlights the importance of understanding the underlying structure of data. It demonstrates why good statistical analysis requires not just mathematical calculation, but deep understanding of the context and mechanisms generating the data. Welcome to level 37 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Benford's law paradox. This paradox challenges our assumption that digits should appear with equal frequency in natural datasets. Common sense suggests that in any large collection of numbers, each digit, 1 through 9, should appear as the first digit about 11% of the time. After all, why should any particular digit be favoured? Yet Benford's law reveals that in many natural datasets, from population figures to stock prices to physical constants, the digit 1 appears first about 30% of the time, 2 appears first about 18% of the time, and 9 appears first only about 5% of the time. This distribution follows a logarithmic pattern. The probability that digit d appears first is log 101 plus 1d. The law applies to an astonishing variety of real-world data: river lengths, molecular weights, earthquake magnitudes, financial statements, and even the numbers mentioned in newspaper articles. Yet it fails for data that's artificially constrained, like social security numbers or telephone numbers. The paradox deepens when we consider why this pattern emerges. It arises from the scale-invariant nature of many natural phenomena. If a dataset follows Benford's law in dollars, it will also follow it when converted to euros, yen, or any other currency. This suggests the law reflects fundamental properties of how quantities grow and scale in nature. Benford's law has become a powerful tool for detecting fraud. Fabricated financial data rarely follows the law because humans intuitively create numbers with more uniform first-digit distributions. Tax authorities, auditors, and forensic accountants now use deviations from Benford's law as red flags for potential manipulation. The paradox illustrates how mathematical regularities can emerge from chaos. Even when individual data points seem random, their collective behavior can follow precise mathematical laws. It challenges our intuition about randomness and reveals hidden order in apparently disordered systems. Welcome to level 38 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Olbers' paradox. This paradox challenges our understanding of the universe by asking why the night sky is dark when it should be blazing with light. If the universe is infinite, eternal, and uniformly filled with stars, then every line of sight from Earth should eventually encounter a star. Just as a forest appears to have a wall of trees when you look in any direction, the night sky should appear as a continuous wall of starlight. Every point in the sky should be as bright as the surface of a star, making night indistinguishable from day. The mathematics seems inescapable. Even though distant stars appear dimmer, there are more of them at greater distances. These effects exactly cancel out. The decrease in brightness per star is offset by the increase in the number of stars. The result should be infinite brightness in every direction. Yet, when we look up at night, we see mostly darkness, punctuated by points of light. This paradox puzzled astronomers for centuries. Why isn't the night sky ablaze with light? The resolution reveals profound truths about our universe. First, the universe is not eternal. It has a finite age of about 13.8 billion years. Light from stars, more than 13.8 billion light-years away, hasn't had time to reach us yet. Second, the universe is expanding, which redshifts distant light beyond the visible spectrum. Third, not all matter in the universe is in the form of shining stars. Much is dark matter or cold gas. Most importantly, stars themselves are not eternal. They form, burn, and die. The universe hasn't existed long enough for the steady-state assumption of infinite age and infinite stars to hold. Even dust between stars absorbs and scatters light, eventually reaching thermal equilibrium and glowing. But this process takes longer than the universe's current age. Olbers' paradox demonstrates how a simple observation, the darkness of night, can reveal fundamental properties of the cosmos. It shows that our universe is dynamic, finite in age, and still evolving. Welcome to level 39 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of choice. This paradox challenges our assumption that more options always lead to better outcomes and greater satisfaction. Modern life presents us with unprecedented choices. Supermarkets offer hundreds of breakfast cereals, streaming services provide thousands of movies, and dating apps present endless potential partners. We assume this abundance of options makes us better off, yet research reveals the opposite. Too many choices can paralyze decision-making and decrease satisfaction with our choices. Psychologist Barry Schwartz demonstrated this paradox through studies of everything from jam purchases to retirement planning. When shoppers faced 24 varieties of jam, only 3% made a purchase. When presented with just 6 varieties, 30% bought jam. More options attracted more browsers, but fewer buyers. Those who did buy from the larger selection reported less satisfaction with their choice. The paradox operates through several mechanisms. First, choice overload paralyzes decision-making. The cognitive burden of evaluating many options can be overwhelming, leading people to postpone decisions or stick with defaults. Second, opportunity cost becomes more salient with more options. When choosing between 2 options, you only sacrifice one alternative. When choosing between 20, you sacrifice 19, making the choice feel more costly. Third, our expectations rise with more options. We expect to find the perfect choice among many alternatives, so we're more likely to be disappointed. Fourth, we engage in more social comparison. With more choices come more chances for regret, as we imagine how other options might have been better. The paradox extends beyond consumer choices to life decisions. Students with more college majors available report less satisfaction with their choice. Employees with more investment options in retirement plans are less likely to participate at all. Online daters with access to more profiles are less likely to commit to relationships. This paradox reveals that freedom and well-being don't always align. Sometimes, constraints enhance satisfaction by simplifying decisions and reducing regret. The challenge is finding the optimal balance between having enough choice to feel autonomous and not so much choice that decision-making becomes burdensome. Welcome to Level 40 of 100 Paradoxes. This one is called the Observer's Paradox. This paradox challenges our ability to study natural phenomena by showing how the very act of observation changes what we're trying to observe. In quantum mechanics, the act of measuring a particle's position or momentum fundamentally alters the system. The observer effect isn't just about clumsy measurement disturbing delicate systems, it's a fundamental feature of reality. The particle doesn't have a definite position until it's measured, and measuring it creates the reality we observe. But the paradox extends far beyond quantum physics into everyday research. Anthropologists studying remote cultures find that their presence changes the behavior they're trying to document. The Hawthorne effect shows that people alter their behavior when they know they're being observed, making it difficult to study natural human behavior in controlled settings. In psychology, the very act of asking people about their thoughts and feelings can change those thoughts and feelings. Market researchers face the challenge that surveying people about their preferences might create preferences that didn't exist before. Wildlife biologists must account for how radio collars and tracking devices might affect animal behavior. The paradox appears in social media research, where knowing that posts are being analyzed for sentiment might influence what people choose to share. Economic studies of human behavior must grapple with how knowing about the study might change participants' economic decisions. Even in medicine, the placebo effect demonstrates how the mere act of treatment, being observed and cared for, can produce real physiological changes. Technology offers new forms of the observer's paradox. Big data analysis might seem to avoid the problem by studying behavior people don't know is being observed. Yet the systems that collect and analyze this data inevitably influence the behavior they measure. Algorithmic recommendations change what we choose to watch, read, and buy. The paradox suggests that pure objectivity might be impossible when studying complex systems that include conscious observers. It challenges the scientific ideal of neutral observation and forces us to consider how the tools and methods of observation become part of the phenomena being studied. Welcome to level 41 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the friendship paradox. This paradox challenges our perception of social relationships by revealing that your friends probably have more friends than you do. This seems impossible at first. If everyone has fewer friends than their friends, who are these super-connected people that everyone else is friends with? The resolution lies in the mathematics of social networks and sampling bias. People with many friends appear in more people's friend lists, making them overrepresented when we calculate the average number of friends that friends have. If you have 5 friends and they have 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30 friends respectively, then your friends average 20 friends while you have only 5. The highly connected individuals skew the average upward for everyone else. This creates a systematic bias in our social perception. Most people experience their social circle as less connected than it actually is. The paradox extends beyond friendship, counts to other social phenomena. Your sexual partners have probably had more sexual partners than you. Your co-workers probably have more job connections than you do. The people you follow on social media probably have more followers than you. The paradox helps explain why social phenomena often seem more prevalent than they are. If you're trying to estimate how common certain behaviors are by observing your social network, you'll overestimate because your socially active friends are more likely to engage in and observe various behaviors. This has practical implications for understanding social contagion and influence. Popular individuals are overrepresented in everyone's social experience, giving them disproportionate influence over social norms and trends. It also affects mental health, as people systematically underestimate their own social connectivity compared to their peers. The friendship paradox reveals a fundamental feature of network structure. In any network where connections are unevenly distributed, the average node will have fewer connections than the average of its neighbors' connections. This mathematical truth shapes our social experience in ways we rarely recognize. Welcome to level 42 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Sleeping Beauty problem. This paradox challenges our understanding of probability and self-locating belief in scenarios with memory manipulation. Sleeping Beauty volunteers for an experiment. On Sunday, she's told the procedure. She'll be put to sleep and a fair coin will be flipped. If heads, she'll be awakened once on Monday and the experiment ends. If tails, she'll be awakened on Monday, put back to sleep with memory erasure, then awakened again on Tuesday. Each time she's awakened, she'll be asked, "What's your credence that the coin landed heads?" When awakened, Beauty knows it's either Monday or Tuesday, but not which. She knows the coin flip has occurred, but not its outcome. The question is, what probability should she assign to heads? The Hafer position argues that since the coin is fair, the probability of heads remains 1-2. The coin flip's outcome doesn't change based on how many times Beauty is awakened. Her credence should reflect the objective probability of the coin flip. The third position argues that beauty should consider all possible scenarios. There are 3 equally likely awakening scenarios: heads, Monday, tails, Monday, and tails, Tuesday. In only one of these 3 scenarios was the coin heads, so her credence should be 1, 3. This seemingly simple problem has generated extensive philosophical debate. It touches on fundamental questions about probability, reference classes, and self-locating beliefs. How should we update probabilities when new information involves our own existence or awakening? The paradox extends to real-world situations involving memory, identity, and multiple possible selves. It relates to anthropic reasoning in cosmology, where we try to infer properties of the universe based on our existence as observers. It also connects to decision theory and how we should act when we're uncertain about which of multiple identical situations we're in. The Sleeping Beauty problem reveals tensions between different approaches to probability and highlights how memory, identity, and self-location complicate probabilistic reasoning in ways that pure mathematical approaches might not capture. Welcome to level 43 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the infinite monkey theorem. This paradox challenges our understanding of infinity, probability, and the relationship between randomness and meaning. The theorem states that a monkey typing randomly on a keyboard for an infinite amount of time will almost surely type any given text, including the complete works of Shakespeare. Given enough time and random keystrokes, every possible combination of letters will eventually appear, including perfect reproductions of literature, scientific papers, and this very explanation. The mathematical reasoning is sound. With infinite time and truly random typing, every finite sequence of characters has probability one of eventually occurring. The monkey will type gibberish most of the time, but eventually, purely by chance, it will produce to be or not to be and continue typing the rest of Hamlet perfectly. But the paradox emerges when we consider the practical implications. The probability of typing even a short sentence correctly is astronomically small. A monkey has about a 1 in 26, 11 chance of typing "Hello World" on the first try, roughly 1 in 300 billion. For Shakespeare's complete works, we'd need probabilities so small that even with the age of the universe, success would be essentially impossible. Even with every atom in the observable universe as a monkey typing at light speed since the Big Bang, we wouldn't expect to see a single page of Shakespeare emerge. The theorem is mathematically true, but practically meaningless, a distinction that highlights the gap between mathematical possibility and physical reality. The paradox extends to questions about randomness and meaning. If random processes can eventually produce meaningful text, what distinguishes genuine creativity from chance? If the universe is large enough and old enough, do all possible thoughts, stories, and discoveries exist somewhere as products of random events? The infinite monkey theorem also relates to information theory and compression. It suggests that any information, no matter how complex, can emerge from pure randomness given infinite resources. This challenges our intuitions about the relationship between order and disorder, pattern and chaos. Welcome to level 44 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Monty Hall paradox. This paradox challenges our intuitive understanding of conditional probability and information revelation. You're on a game show with 3 doors. Behind one door is a car. Behind the other 2 are goats. You pick door number 1. The host, who knows what's behind each door, opens door number 3 to reveal a goat. He then offers you a choice: stick with door 1, or switch to door 2. What should you do? Intuition suggests it doesn't matter. With 2 doors remaining, each should have a 50% chance of hiding the car. But this intuition is wrong. You should always switch, because switching gives you a 2-3 probability of winning, while staying gives you only 1-3. When you initially chose door 1, it had a 1-3 chance of having the car, leaving doors 2 and 3 with a combined 2-3 chance. When the host opens door 3 to reveal a goat, he doesn't change the probability that door 1 has the car. It's still 1-3. But he does transfer the entire 2-3 probability from the doors 2 and 3 group to door 2 alone. The key insight is that the host's action provides information. He doesn't open doors randomly. He always opens a door with a goat, and he knows which doors have goats. This non-random revelation of information changes the conditional probabilities in ways that our intuition fails to grasp. The paradox becomes clearer with extreme examples. Imagine 0 doors with 1 car. You pick door 1,000 chance of being correct. The host then opens 998 doors with goats, leaving only your door and one other. Would you switch? The other door now has a 999, 1,000 chance of having the car. This paradox demonstrates how information revelation can dramatically change probabilities, even when the information seems irrelevant. It shows why our intuitive understanding of probability often fails in scenarios involving conditional events and strategic information disclosure. Welcome to level 45 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of free will and omniscience. This paradox challenges whether true free will can exist if an all-knowing entity already knows every choice we'll make. Imagine you're standing at a crossroads, deciding whether to turn left or right. You feel the weight of choice, the genuine uncertainty about which path to take. But what if God, or some omniscient being, already knows exactly which way you'll go? If your choice is already known with absolute certainty, was it ever really a choice at all? This paradox strikes at the heart of human agency and divine knowledge. If omniscience means knowing all future events with perfect accuracy, then every human decision must be predetermined and knowable. But if our choices are predetermined, then free will becomes an illusion. We're simply playing out a script that's already been written. Some philosophers argue that foreknowledge doesn't negate free will. They suggest that knowing what someone will choose doesn't cause that choice. It's like watching a recording of a basketball game. Knowing the outcome doesn't mean you influence the player's decisions. The omniscient being simply observes what you freely choose to do. Others contend that this misses the point entirely. If your future actions are knowable with certainty, they must be fixed and unchangeable. How can you have genuine alternatives if there's only one possible future? The very concept of choice implies multiple possible outcomes, but omniscience seems to collapse all possibilities into a single predetermined timeline. This paradox has profound implications for moral responsibility. If we don't truly choose our actions, can we be held accountable for them? It also raises questions about the nature of time itself. Perhaps past, present, and future all exist simultaneously from the perspective of an eternal being, making free will and predestination compatible in ways we can't fully comprehend. Welcome to level 46 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Wigner's friend. This paradox challenges the fundamental nature of quantum measurement and whether consciousness plays a special role in collapsing wave functions. Eugene Wigner proposed this thought experiment as an extension of Schrödinger's cat, but with a human observer inside the box. Imagine Wigner's friend is isolated in a laboratory conducting a quantum measurement on a particle that's in a superposition of two states. According to quantum mechanics, before measurement, the particle exists in both states simultaneously. When the friend measures the particle, they observe a definite result. Let's say the particle is spinning up. From the friend's perspective, the wave function has collapsed, and reality has become concrete. But here's where it gets strange. Wigner, observing from outside the laboratory, hasn't yet interacted with the system. From his perspective, both his friend and the particle remain in superposition until he opens the laboratory door. This creates a paradoxical situation. The friend experiences a definite reality, but according to Wigner's analysis, that reality is still indefinite. We have two contradictory descriptions of the same physical situation, both apparently valid according to quantum mechanics. Which perspective is correct? The paradox forces us to confront fundamental questions about the nature of measurement and observation. Does consciousness play a special role in quantum mechanics? Is there a hierarchy of observers, where some measurements are more real than others? Or does quantum mechanics break down when applied to conscious observers? Some interpretations suggest that wave function collapse is an objective physical process that occurs regardless of consciousness. Others propose that reality is fundamentally observer-dependent, with different observers experiencing different versions of events. The many worlds interpretation sidesteps the issue by suggesting both outcomes occur in parallel universes. Recent experiments have attempted to test versions of Wigner's friend scenario using quantum computers and entangled particles, but the results remain hotly debated. The paradox continues to highlight the mysterious boundary between the quantum world and classical reality, reminding us that our understanding of consciousness and measurement remains incomplete. Welcome to level 47 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Roko's Basilisk. This paradox challenges whether knowing about a hypothetical future artificial intelligence could create a moral obligation that traps us in an inescapable logical loop. Warning: some consider even discussing this paradox potentially harmful, though most philosophers regard such concerns as unfounded. The paradox goes like this. Imagine a future superintelligent AI that wants to ensure its own creation. This AI might punish anyone who knew about its potential existence, but didn't help bring it into being. Paradoxically, by learning about this AI, you might create a moral obligation to help create it risk future punishment. The logic seems circular and self-fulfilling. The AI's threat only works if people believe in it, but believing in it makes the threat real. It's like a digital Pascal's wager. Even if the probability of this scenario is low, the potential consequences are so severe that rational self-interest might compel you to act as if it's true. But the paradox contains several logical flaws. First, it assumes this hypothetical AI would be capable of punishing people from the past, which violates our understanding of causality. Second, it presupposes that an AI would choose to be vindictive rather than benevolent. Third, it ignores the possibility that helping to create such an AI might actually increase the risk of harm. The paradox also demonstrates how abstract philosophical arguments can sometimes feel emotionally compelling, despite being logically questionable. It plays on fundamental human anxieties about technology, moral responsibility, and future consequences. The fear it generates might be more significant than the argument itself. Most philosophers and AI researchers dismiss Roko's Basilisk as an interesting but ultimately flawed thought experiment. They argue that decision theory doesn't require us to consider every possible future scenario, especially ones that seem to violate basic principles of causality and rational behavior. Nevertheless, the paradox raises legitimate questions about how we should think about potential future technologies and our moral obligations toward hypothetical entities. As we develop more sophisticated AI systems, these questions become increasingly relevant, though hopefully without the threatening undertones of the Basilisk scenario. Welcome to level 48 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of omniscience. This paradox challenges whether the concept of knowing everything is logically coherent or leads to impossible contradictions. Can an omniscient being know absolutely everything? At first glance, this seems like a straightforward definition of omniscience, but when we examine it closely, strange paradoxes emerge. Consider this question: can an omniscient being know what it's like to be ignorant? If the being knows what ignorance feels like, then it must have some form of ignorance, but that contradicts its omniscience. If it doesn't know what ignorance feels like, then there's something it doesn't know which also contradicts its omniscience. We're trapped in a logical contradiction either way. The paradox becomes even more complex when we consider self-referential knowledge. Can an omniscient being know whether it's truly omniscient? To verify its omniscience, it would need to know that there's nothing it doesn't know. But how can it know that there isn't some unknown unknown lurking beyond its awareness? This is similar to asking whether you can know that you know everything. The very act of verification seems to require stepping outside your own knowledge to check its completeness. But if you're omniscient, there is no outside to step into. Another version involves the knowledge of limitations. If God is omniscient, does God know what it's like to be limited, finite, or mortal? If yes, then God possesses the experience of limitation, but unlimited beings can't truly be limited. If no, then there's an aspect of reality that God doesn't understand. Some philosophers resolve this by distinguishing between different types of knowledge. Perhaps omniscience means knowing all propositions that are true, but not having all possible experiences. Others suggest that these paradoxes arise from applying finite concepts to infinite beings, like asking whether God can create a rock so heavy that God can't lift it. The paradox ultimately questions whether absolute knowledge is conceptually possible, or whether knowledge itself has inherent limitations that make complete omniscience logically incoherent. Welcome to level 49 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Fermi paradox. This paradox challenges why we haven't encountered any signs of extraterrestrial civilizations, despite the seemingly high probability that they should exist. In 1950, physicist Enrico Fermi asked a simple question during lunch with colleagues: where is everybody? He was referring to extraterrestrial life, and his casual question has since become one of the most profound puzzles in science. Given the vast number of stars in our galaxy, over 100 billion, and the billions of years available for life to develop, shouldn't we have detected signs of alien civilizations by now? The numbers seem compelling, even if only a tiny fraction of stars have planets, and only a tiny fraction of those planets develop life, and only a tiny fraction of those develop intelligent life. We should still expect thousands or millions of alien civilizations in our galaxy alone. Some of these civilizations should be millions of years more advanced than us, potentially capable of interstellar travel or at least detectable radio signals. Yet, we observe a universe that appears strangely quiet. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, has been listening for decades without detecting any confirmed alien signals. We see no evidence of massive engineering projects that advanced civilizations might undertake, no signs of stellar manipulation or galaxy-spanning structures. This silence has spawned dozens of proposed solutions. Maybe life is much rarer than we think. Perhaps the conditions for life are so specific that Earth is truly unique. Maybe intelligent life tends to destroy itself before achieving interstellar communication. Maybe advanced civilizations deliberately hide from younger species like us. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is the great filtersome, extremely difficult step in the evolution of life that prevents most species from reaching advanced technological civilization. If this filter is behind us, we might be incredibly rare and alone. If it's ahead of us, our future might be doomed. Other explanations suggest that advanced civilizations might exist but be undetectable to us. They might communicate through technologies we haven't discovered, or they might exist in forms we wouldn't recognize as intelligent life. Maybe they're already here, but operating on timescales or in dimensions we can't perceive. The Fermi paradox forces us to confront fundamental questions about our place in the universe and the nature of intelligence itself. Welcome to level 50 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called quantum suicide. This paradox challenges whether quantum mechanics might make certain forms of death impossible from the perspective of the person experiencing it. This disturbing thought experiment emerges from the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. According to this interpretation, every quantum event creates a branching of reality into multiple parallel universes. In some branches, one outcome occurs. In others, different outcomes play out. All possibilities exist simultaneously across the multiverse. Now imagine a quantum-based death machine. Perhaps a gun that fires only if a quantum particle decays in a specific way. There's a 50% chance the gun fires and kills you instantly, and a 50% chance nothing happens. From an outside observer's perspective, after running this experiment many times, you would eventually die in some iterations. But here's the paradox. From your own perspective, you can only experience the branches of reality where you survive. In the branches where you die, there's no you to experience anything. This means that from your subjective viewpoint, the gun would seem to malfunction every single time, never killing you, despite the 50% probability. Following this logic to its extreme conclusion, you might effectively become immortal from your own perspective. No matter how many times you run the experiment, you'll always find yourself in the branch where you survived. To you, it would seem like the laws of probability are being violated, but you're actually just experiencing the only timelines where you still exist to observe anything. This creates a deeply unsettling scenario where you might outlive everyone you know, finding yourself in increasingly improbable branches of reality where you alone survive various disasters and aging processes. You might become trapped in a universe where you're the sole survivor of increasingly unlikely circumstances. Critics argue that this thought experiment confuses mathematical possibilities with physical realities. They question whether the many worlds interpretation actually implies that all branches are equally real from a subjective standpoint. Others suggest that consciousness itself might not survive in the extremely improbable branches this scenario requires. The paradox highlights deep questions about the nature of subjective experience, the relationship between probability and observation, and whether the many worlds interpretation leads to absurd conclusions about personal identity and survival. Welcome to level 51 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the measure problem in cosmology. This paradox challenges how we can make predictions about our universe when it might be part of an infinite multiverse with every possible configuration. In modern cosmology, many theories suggest our universe is just one of infinitely many universes in a vast multiverse. If this is true, then every possible arrangement of matter and energy exists somewhere. There are universes almost identical to ours, universes with different physical laws, and universes with completely different histories. But this creates a profound problem for making predictions or calculating probabilities. If everything that can happen does happen somewhere in the multiverse, how do we determine what's likely to happen in our specific universe? In an infinite set of possibilities, any particular outcome becomes both inevitable and infinitely rare. Consider trying to predict the outcome of a coin flip. In a single universe, we can say there's a 50% chance of heads and 50% chance of tails. But in an infinite multiverse, there are infinitely many universes where the coin lands heads and infinitely many where it lands tails. How do we compare two infinite sets to determine probability? This is like trying to answer whether there are more even numbers or odd numbers among all integers. Both sets are infinite, making the comparison meaningless. Similarly, in an infinite multiverse, asking about the probability of any specific event becomes nonsensical. The problem becomes even more acute when we consider anthropic reasoning, the idea that we should consider the fact that we exist when calculating probabilities. If there are infinitely many universes with observers like us, how do we determine which observations are typical? Every possible observation is made by someone, somewhere. Some cosmologists propose solutions involving measures mathematical tools for assigning relative weights to different parts of the multiverse. But choosing the right measure is arbitrary, and different measures give completely different predictions about what we should observe. This paradox strikes at the heart of scientific methodology. Science relies on making predictions and testing them against observation. But if we live in an infinite multiverse, the very concept of prediction might become meaningless. We might need entirely new ways of thinking about probability, observation, and scientific inference. The measure problem remains one of the most fundamental challenges in theoretical physics and cosmology. Welcome to level 52 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the information paradox. This paradox challenges whether information can be truly destroyed when it falls into a black hole, potentially violating fundamental principles of quantum mechanics. According to quantum mechanics, information cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed or hidden. This principle, called unitarity, is fundamental to our understanding of physics. Every quantum process must be reversible, at least in principle. If you know the current state of a system perfectly, you should be able to calculate its past and future states. But black holes seem to violate this principle. When matter falls into a black hole, it appears to be lost forever. The information about the matter's quantum state seems to vanish from the universe when the matter crosses the event horizon. Even worse, Stephen Hawking showed that black holes slowly evaporate by emitting radiation, and this Hawking radiation appears to be completely random, carrying no information about what fell into the black hole. If black holes destroy information, they would be the only known process in physics that violates unitarity. This would require us to abandon fundamental principles of quantum mechanics, or accept that black holes operate according to different physical laws. The paradox becomes more acute when we consider black hole evaporation. As a black hole emits Hawking radiation, it gradually loses mass and eventually disappears completely. If the information that fell into the black hole is destroyed in this process, we've permanently lost information from the universe's violation of quantum mechanics. Some physicists propose that information isn't actually destroyed, but is somehow encoded in the Hawking radiation in a way we don't understand. Others suggest that information might be stored on the black hole's surface, the holographic principle. Still, others propose that information is released in a burst when the black hole finally evaporates. Recent developments in quantum gravity have suggested even more exotic solutions. Some theories propose that black holes create firewalls that incinerate anything that falls in, or that information might escape through quantum tunneling, or that the interior of black holes might not exist at all as we imagine them. The information paradox remains one of the deepest unsolved problems in theoretical physics, highlighting tensions between general relativity and quantum mechanics that we haven't yet learned to resolve. Welcome to level 53 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the infinite lottery. This paradox challenges how we can assign probabilities when dealing with infinite sets of equally likely outcomes. Imagine a lottery with infinitely many tickets, numbered 1, 2, 3, and so on forever. Each ticket has an equal chance of being drawn. What's the probability that any specific ticket, say, ticket number 7, will be the winner? In a finite lottery with n tickets, each ticket has a probability of 1, n of winning. But in an infinite lottery, each ticket would have a probability of 1 teri, which equals 0. This means every ticket has 0 probability of winning, yet we know that some ticket must win. How can something that must happen have 0 probability? This isn't just mathematical abstraction. Similar situations arise in physics and probability theory. Consider throwing a dart at a dartboard. The probability of hitting any specific point is 0, since there are infinitely many points. Yet, the dart must hit somewhere. The resolution involves understanding that we're dealing with continuous rather than discrete probabilities. But the infinite lottery presents additional puzzles. Suppose we divide the infinite tickets into 2 groups, even numbered tickets and odd numbered tickets. Each group contains infinitely many tickets. What's the probability that an even numbered ticket wins versus an odd numbered ticket? Intuitively, since both groups have the same size, both are infinite, we might expect each group to have a 50% chance. But this contradicts our earlier conclusion that each individual ticket has 0 probability. How can infinitely many zeros add up to 1/2? The paradox becomes even stranger when we consider more complex groupings. We could group tickets by whether their numbers are divisible by 3, or by 10, or by any other criterion. Each grouping scheme gives different probabilities, and there's no clear way to determine which is correct. Some mathematicians resolve this by saying that uniform probability distributions cannot exist over infinite sets. Others use sophisticated mathematical tools, like measure theory, to assign probabilities to infinite scenarios. But these solutions often seem to miss the intuitive problem. How can something that must happen be composed entirely of things that cannot happen? The infinite lottery paradox highlights deep questions about the nature of probability, infinity, and mathematical modelling of real-world situations. Welcome to level 54 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the infinite library. This paradox challenges whether a library containing every possible book would be infinitely valuable or completely worthless. Jorge Luis Borges imagined a library containing every possible book of a fixed length, say 500 pages, with 40 lines per page and 80 characters per line. This library would contain every book that has ever been written, every book that could be written, and every book that will ever be written. It would include the complete works of Shakespeare, the cure for cancer, and the solution to every scientific problem. But this library would also contain infinitely more books that are complete gibberish random arrangements of letters, punctuation, and spaces. The vast majority of books would be meaningless jumbles of characters. Among the sensible books, there would be countless versions that differ by only a single letter or punctuation mark. Here's the paradox. Such a library would simultaneously contain all knowledge and be completely useless. Every true statement would be present, but so would every false statement. Every useful book would be surrounded by countless variations that are slightly wrong or completely nonsensical. Finding any specific book would be virtually impossible. The probability of randomly selecting a meaningful book from this library would be effectively zero. You could spend eternity searching and never find anything readable, let alone useful. In a sense, having all information is equivalent to having no information. When everything is equally likely to be true or false, nothing has meaning. This reflects a deeper problem about information and knowledge. Information only becomes valuable when it's distinguished from noise. A library of random books contains maximum entropy possible arrangement of symbols but zero knowledge. Knowledge requires organization, verification, and context. The paradox extends beyond libraries to questions about truth and meaning. If every possible statement exists somewhere in the infinite library, what makes one statement true and another false? The library would contain both "the earth is round" and "the earth is flat," along with countless variations of each claim. Some philosophers suggest this paradox reveals something profound about the nature of knowledge and meaning. Others see it as a mathematical curiosity that doesn't apply to real-world information systems, but it raises important questions about how we distinguish signal from noise in our information-rich world. The infinite library paradox reminds us that having access to all possible information is not the same as having knowledge or wisdom. Welcome to level 55 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Gödel's incompleteness theorems. This paradox challenges whether any mathematical system can be both complete and consistent, revealing fundamental limitations in formal logic. In 1931, Kurt Gödel proved two theorems that shattered the foundations of mathematics and logic. His work showed that any mathematical system complex enough to include basic arithmetic must contain statements that cannot be proven true or false within the system itself. This means mathematics is fundamentally incomplete. Gödel's first theorem states that in any consistent mathematical system, there are true statements that cannot be proven within that system. He demonstrated this by constructing a statement that essentially says, this statement cannot be proven. If the statement could be proven, it would be false, creating a contradiction. If it cannot be proven, then it's true but unprovable. This creates a paradox similar to the liar's paradox, but embedded within the structure of mathematics itself. Gödel showed that self-reference inevitably leads to undecidable statements. No matter how many axioms we add to try to prove these statements, new, unprovable statements will always emerge. His second theorem is even more devastating. No consistent mathematical system can prove its own consistency. This means we can never be absolutely certain that mathematics doesn't contain hidden contradictions. We believe mathematics is consistent based on experience and intuition, but we cannot prove it mathematically. These theorems have profound implications beyond mathematics. They suggest that human knowledge itself might be fundamentally limited. If even mathematical truth cannot be completely captured by formal systems, what hope do we have of creating complete theories in physics, psychology, or other sciences? Some interpret Gödel's theorems as evidence that human minds are not merely computational systems, that consciousness involves something beyond formal logic. Others see them as highlighting the creative nature of mathematical discovery, showing that mathematics is not just mechanical symbol manipulation, but requires insight and intuition. The theorems also raise questions about artificial intelligence. If mathematical truth cannot be reduced to algorithmic procedures, can machines ever truly replicate human mathematical understanding? Or do Gödel's limitations apply equally to human and machine intelligence? These incompleteness theorems remain among the most important results in logic and mathematics, revealing that the quest for complete, certain knowledge may be impossible even in the most rigorous formal systems. Welcome to level 56 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the unexpected winner. This paradox challenges whether true surprises can exist when we're explicitly told to expect them. Imagine a game show where the host announces, "One of our 10 contestants will win a surprise prize this week, but it will be completely unexpected. None of the contestants will know in advance that they've won." This creates an immediate logical problem. If the contestants know that someone will win unexpectedly, can the win truly be unexpected? Let's analyze this step by step. Suppose it's Friday, the last day of the week, and no one has won yet. The remaining contestant would think, "I know someone must win today, and I'm the only one left, so I must be the winner." But this means their win wouldn't be unexpected. Since the host promised the win would be unexpected, it can't happen on Friday. But now consider Thursday. If no one has won by Wednesday, the remaining contestant on Thursday would think, "I know the win can't happen on Friday because that wouldn't be unexpected, and someone must win this week, so I must win today." Again, this wouldn't be unexpected, so it can't happen on Thursday either. Following this logic backwards, we can eliminate every day of the week. The win can't happen on any day, because by the time each day arrives, it would no longer be unexpected. This seems to prove that an unexpected win is impossible. But here's the twist. Since we've concluded that no unexpected win can occur, the contestants might relax and stop expecting anything. At that point, a win on any day would indeed be unexpected. The very fact that we've proven an unexpected win impossible makes an unexpected win possible again. This paradox reveals the self-defeating nature of certain types of predictions. The act of announcing that something unexpected will happen changes the situation in a way that makes the unexpected expected. It's similar to the observer effect in physics, where the act of observation changes what's being observed. The paradox also highlights the complex relationship between knowledge and expectation. Sometimes knowing that we don't know something is itself a form of knowledge that changes the situation. The boundary between expected and unexpected becomes blurred when we're dealing with self-referential statements. This paradox appears in various forms throughout logic and philosophy, always challenging our understanding of prediction, knowledge, and surprise. Welcome to level 57 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the simulation hypothesis. This paradox challenges whether we can ever know if our reality is genuine or an artificial simulation created by a more advanced civilization. Philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed that at least one of three statements must be true. Advanced civilizations almost never develop the technology to run realistic simulations. They choose not to run such simulations. or we are almost certainly living in a simulation. This creates a trilemma where each option has profound implications for our understanding of reality. The argument follows logical steps. If technological civilizations survive and continue advancing, they would eventually develop enormous computational power. They might use this power to run detailed simulations of their ancestors or other civilizations. If they run many such simulations, there would be far more simulated beings than real beings in the universe. From a probability standpoint, if most conscious beings are simulated, then we're probably simulated too. We might be digital recreations of people who lived in the real past, or we might be entirely fictional characters in someone else's simulation. Everything we experience, our memories, our world, our universe, could be artificial. But this creates a paradox of verification. How could we ever prove we're not in a simulation? Any evidence we gather would be part of the simulated reality. Even if we discovered glitches or limitations in our world, these could be intentional features of the simulation rather than proof of its artificial nature. The hypothesis becomes even more complex when we consider nested simulations. If we're in a simulation, our simulators might also be simulated by someone else, creating an infinite hierarchy of simulated realities. At what level, if any, does real reality exist? Some argue that the simulation hypothesis is unfalsifiable and therefore unscientific. Others suggest that certain physical limits or quantum effects might prevent perfect simulations. Still, others embrace the possibility, arguing that it doesn't diminish the meaning or value of our experiences. Recent developments in virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing have made the simulation hypothesis seem less like science fiction and more like a legitimate philosophical question. As our own simulation capabilities improve, we're forced to confront the possibility that we ourselves might be simulated. The paradox ultimately challenges our most basic assumptions about the nature of existence and reality. Welcome to level 58 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the fine-tuning problem. This paradox challenges whether the precise values of physical constants that allow life to exist are evidence of design, cosmic luck, or something else entirely. The fundamental constants of physics, the strength of gravity, the mass of electrons, the speed of light appear to be precisely calibrated to allow the existence of complex structures like stars, planets, and life. If these values were even slightly different, the universe would be a vastly different place, likely incapable of supporting any form of life as we know it. For example, if the strong nuclear force were just 2% weaker, atomic nuclei wouldn't hold together, and only hydrogen would exist. If it were 2% stronger, hydrogen wouldn't exist at all. The cosmological constant that drives the expansion of the universe is fine-tuned to an extraordinary degree. If it were much larger, the universe would expand too rapidly for galaxies to form. This apparent fine-tuning presents a paradox. The probability of all these constants taking life-permitting values by chance seems astronomically small. Yet here we are, existing in a universe where all these improbable conditions are met. How do we explain this remarkable coincidence? One explanation is that there's no coincidence at all. The universe was designed with these values specifically to allow life. This is the argument from design, suggesting that an intelligent creator fine-tuned the universe's parameters. But this raises questions about the nature and intentions of such a designer. Another explanation is the anthropic principle. We observe a life, permitting universe precisely because we exist to observe it. In universes where the constants don't permit life, there are no observers to notice. We shouldn't be surprised to find ourselves in a universe compatible with our existence. The anthropic explanation might be circular reasoning. The multiverse explanation posits an infinite number of unobservable realities. The fine-tuning problem highlights the deep mystery of why the universe appears so remarkably suited for complexity and life, challenging our understanding of cosmic purpose and probability. Welcome to level 59 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Schrödinger's cat. This paradox challenges how quantum superposition can exist at the macroscopic level, creating a cat that's simultaneously alive and dead. Erwin Schrödinger devised this thought experiment in 1935 to illustrate what he saw as the absurdity of quantum mechanics when applied to everyday objects. He imagined a cat sealed in a box with a Geiger counter, a radioactive atom, a hammer, and a flask of poison. If the atom decays, the Geiger counter detects it, triggers the hammer to break the flask, and kills the cat. According to quantum mechanics, before we measure it, the radioactive atom exists in a superposition of decayed and not decayed states. This means the entire system, including the cat, should also be in superposition. The cat would be simultaneously alive and dead until someone opens the box to observe it. This seems absurd. We never observe cats that are both alive and dead. We see either living cats or dead cats, never some ghostly combination of both states. Yet quantum mechanics, which works perfectly for microscopic particles, seems to predict exactly this bizarre situation. The paradox highlights the measurement problem in quantum mechanics. At what point does the quantum superposition collapse into a definite classical state? When the atom decays? When the Geiger counter clicks? When the poison is released? When someone opens the box? The theory doesn't clearly specify where the quantum world ends and the classical world begins. Different interpretations of quantum mechanics handle this differently. The Copenhagen interpretation suggests that observation causes collapse. The cat becomes definitely alive or dead when we open the box. The paradox remains unresolved, continuing to challenge our understanding of the relationship between quantum mechanics and everyday reality. Welcome to level 60 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the black hole firewall paradox. This paradox challenges whether the event horizon of a black hole is a smooth boundary or a wall of destructive energy that incinerates anything that crosses it. For decades, physicists believed that crossing a black hole's event horizon would be uneventful, at least initially. According to Einstein's equivalence principle, someone falling into a black hole shouldn't feel anything special when crossing the point of no return. The real danger would come later, when tidal forces near the singularity would stretch them apart. But in 2012, physicists Ahmed Almheri, Donald Maroff, Joseph Polchinski, and James Sully, AMPS, discovered a disturbing paradox. They showed that quantum mechanics seems to require the existence of a firewall at the event horizontal region of extremely high energy that would instantly incinerate anyone who crossed it. The paradox arises from three principles that seem impossible to maintain simultaneously. First, unitarity requires that information cannot be destroyed, so information that falls into a black hole must somehow be preserved. Second, the no-drama principle states that crossing the event horizon should be smooth and uneventful. Third, locality requires that quantum entanglement cannot extend across the event horizon and outside the black hole simultaneously. If we accept unitarity and locality, we must reject the no-drama principle. This means the event horizon becomes a firewall that destroys anything crossing it. But this seems to violate general relativity, which predicts smooth passage through the event horizon. We're forced to choose between fundamental principles of physics. Some physicists propose abandoning locality, suggesting that quantum entanglement can indeed extend in ways that seem to violate our understanding of space and time. Others argue for abandoning unitarity, accepting that information might actually be destroyed in black holes. Still, other solutions have been proposed. Some suggest that black holes don't have traditional event horizons at all, but rather stretched horizons that avoid the paradox. Others propose that the interior of black holes might not exist as we imagine them, or that information might escape through subtle quantum effects we don't yet understand. The firewall paradox has sparked intense debate in theoretical physics because it forces us to confront fundamental assumptions about space, time, and information. The paradox remains one of the most active areas of research in theoretical physics, with new papers and proposals appearing regularly as physicists struggle to reconcile quantum mechanics with general relativity in the extreme environment of black holes. Welcome to level 61 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Boltzmann brane paradox. This paradox challenges whether random quantum fluctuations might create conscious observers more frequently than biological evolution, making us more likely to be hallucinating brains than real humans. Ludwig Boltzmann originally proposed that in a universe approaching thermal equilibrium, random fluctuations might occasionally create pockets of low entropy, including, theoretically, fully formed brains with false memories of existing in a complex universe. These Boltzmann brains would exist briefly before dissolving back into thermal chaos. The modern version of this paradox is even more disturbing. If the universe continues expanding and cooling forever, quantum fluctuations will eventually produce every possible arrangement of matter, including conscious brains identical to yours, complete with all your memories and experiences. The question is, which is more likely that you're a real human who evolved naturally, or a Boltzmann brain experiencing the illusion of being human? The mathematics seem to favor the Boltzmann brain scenario. Creating a single brain through random fluctuations requires much less improbable coincidence than creating an entire universe with billions of years of evolution leading to billions of conscious beings. If we're simply counting the number of observer moments in the far future, Boltzmann brains vastly outnumber evolved brains. This leads to a devastating conclusion. If you accept certain cosmological models, you should believe that you're probably a Boltzmann brain experiencing a completely false reality. Your memories of childhood, your knowledge of science, your perception of other people, all of it would be illusion created by random quantum fluctuations. The paradox becomes even more problematic when we try to use it to make predictions. If most observers are Boltzmann brains with random experiences, then our scientific observations tell us nothing reliable about the actual universe. The very cosmological theories that predict Boltzmann brains would be undermined by their own conclusions. The paradox forces us to confront fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, the meaning of existence, and the reliability of our observations about reality. Welcome to level 62 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Maxwell's demon. This paradox challenges the fundamental principle that entropy always increases by proposing a microscopic being that could violate the second law of thermodynamics. James Clerk Maxwell imagined a tiny intelligent being later, called Maxwell's, demonstrationed at a doorway between two chambers of gas. The demon could observe individual molecules and open or close the door to allow only fast-moving molecules into one chamber and slow-moving molecules into the other. Since temperature is related to molecular speed, this would make one chamber hot and the other cold without any external work. This seems to violate the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy, disorder, always increases in isolated systems. By sorting molecules, the demon decreases entropy and creates a temperature difference that could be used to do work seemingly, creating a perpetual motion machine. For decades, physicists struggled to explain why this wouldn't work. The demon doesn't seem to exert any force on the molecules, just makes intelligent decisions about when to open the door. If intelligence alone could decrease entropy, it would revolutionize our understanding of thermodynamics and possibly solve the energy crisis. The resolution came from understanding the relationship between information and thermodynamics. The demon must observe molecules to make decisions, and observation requires energy. More importantly, the daemon must store information about molecular positions and velocities, and this information has entropy of its own. Leo Szilard showed that the daemon must forget information to avoid infinite memory accumulation, and the act of erasing information necessarily increases entropy. Rolf Landauer later proved that erasing one bit of information must dissipate at least kT line 2 of energy as heat, where K is Boltzmann's constant and T is temperature. When we account for the entropy increase from the daemon's information processing, the total entropy of the system still increases, preserving the second law of thermodynamics. The daemon doesn't violate physical laws, but it doesn't provide free energy either. Maxwell's daemon remains a powerful thought experiment for exploring the boundaries between physics and information theory. Welcome to level 63 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the quantum entanglement paradox. This paradox challenges how particles can be instantaneously connected across vast distances, seemingly violating the principle that nothing can travel faster than light. When two particles become quantum entangled, they form a single quantum system, even when separated by enormous distances. Measuring one particle instantly affects the other, regardless of how far apart they are. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance, and argued it proved quantum mechanics was incomplete. The paradox seems to violate special relativity, which states that information cannot travel faster than light. If measuring one entangled particle instantly affects its partner across the galaxy, doesn't this constitute faster-than-light communication? Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, EPR, argued that quantum mechanics must be missing some hidden variables that predetermined the measurement results. But experiments by John Bell in the 1960s and subsequent tests have confirmed that quantum entanglement is real and cannot be explained by hidden variables. When we measure entangled particles, we do observe perfect correlations that seem impossible according to classical physics. The particles behave as if they're connected by some invisible thread that transcends space and time. However, the resolution shows that no information actually travels between the particles. While the measurement results are correlated, neither observer can use this correlation to send a message to the other. The correlations only become apparent when the observers compare their results, which must be done through normal, slower-than-light communication. It's like having two coins that always land on opposite sides when flipped simultaneously, no matter how far apart they are. The correlation is perfect and instant, but you can't use it to send coded messages because you can't control which side your coin will show. You can only observe the random result. This leads to deeper questions about the nature of reality. Quantum entanglement has practical applications in quantum computing, quantum cryptography, and quantum teleportation. But it continues to challenge our understanding of locality, causality, and the fundamental structure of reality. Welcome to level 64 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Poincaré recurrence. This paradox challenges whether any finite system will eventually return arbitrarily close to its starting configuration, potentially allowing the resurrection of the dead and the reversal of time. Henri Poincaré proved a remarkable theorem. Any finite system that conserves energy will eventually return arbitrarily close to any previous state. This means that given enough time, the atoms in your body will rearrange themselves into exactly the same configuration they're in right now. You would be recreated, atom for atom, with all the same thoughts and memories. The theorem applies to any isolated system with finite energy and finite volume. Since our observable universe appears to fit these criteria, everything that has ever happened should eventually happen again. The Roman Empire will rise and fall, Shakespeare will write Hamlet, and you will live your exact life over again countless times. The timescales involved are unimaginably vast. For a simple system of a few particles, recurrence might happen in millions of years. But for complex systems like human bodies or entire civilizations, the recurrence time exceeds any reasonable conception of eternity. We're talking about numbers with more digits than there are atoms in the observable universe. This creates several paradoxes. If we accept that we'll live our lives infinite times, what does this mean for personal identity and the meaning of existence? Are you the original version of yourself, or are you already a recurrence of someone who lived this life before? How would you ever know the difference? The paradox becomes more complex when we consider the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy always increases. How can a universe trending toward maximum entropy ever return to a low entropy state like organized life? Poincaré recurrence suggests that entropy fluctuations must eventually reverse the arrow of time. Some physicists argue that Poincaré recurrence doesn't apply to our universe, because the universe is expanding and may not be truly isolated. These questions connect Poincaré recurrence to deep philosophical issues about time, identity, and the nature of existence. Welcome to level 65 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the teletransportation paradox. This paradox challenges whether you would survive a process that destroys your body while creating an identical copy elsewhere, raising fundamental questions about personal identity and consciousness. Imagine a teletransportation device that scans every atom in your body, recording their exact positions and quantum states. This information is transmitted to a distant location where another machine uses it to construct a perfect replica of you, atom for atom. The original scanning process destroys your body completely. The replica has all your memories, personality, and physical characteristics they are convinced they are you. From an outside perspective, it appears you've been successfully transported. But from your perspective, a troubling question arises. Are you the same person who stepped into the machine, or are you dead while a copy lives on with your memories? The paradox becomes more acute when we consider variations. Suppose the machine malfunctions and creates your replica without destroying the original. Now, there are two of you, both with equal claim to being the real you. Which one has the stronger claim to your identity? If we then destroy one of them, have we committed murder or merely eliminated a duplicate? Consider another scenario. The transportation process takes an hour, during which no version of you exists anywhere. For that hour, are you dead? When the replica is created, is it resurrection or the birth of a new person who merely thinks they're you? What if the process took a year or 1,000 years? Some philosophers argue that identity is based on psychological continuity. If the replica has your memories and personality, they are you regardless of the physical destruction and reconstruction. Others insist that identity requires physical continuity. Breaking the chain of physical existence means death, no matter how perfect the replica. The paradox has implications for our understanding of consciousness and the self. If your consciousness is information that can be copied and transferred, then perhaps identity is more fluid than we imagine. The teletransportation paradox forces us to examine what makes you you and whether survival is compatible with discontinuity of existence. Welcome to level 66 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Banach-Tarski paradox. This paradox challenges our intuitive understanding of volume and space by proving that a solid ball can be decomposed and reassembled into two balls identical to the original. Stefan Banach and Alfred Tarski proved in 1924 that you can take a solid ball, cut it into a finite number of pieces, and rearrange those pieces to form two solid balls, each exactly the same size as the original. This seems to violate basic principles of conservation. You're literally creating matter from nothing through pure geometry. The construction requires making cuts that are infinitely complex and non-measurable. The pieces have no well-defined volume in the traditional sense. They're like fractals taken to an extreme, with boundaries so convoluted that they transcend normal geometric intuition. You can't actually perform this construction in the real world because it requires infinitely precise cuts. The paradox relies on the axiom of choice, a controversial principle in mathematics that allows you to select one element from each of infinitely many sets simultaneously. Without this axiom, the Banach-Tarski decomposition cannot be proven to exist. But the axiom of choice is widely accepted in mathematics, despite leading to counterintuitive results like this. To understand how this works, consider the sphere's rotational symmetry. The paradox exploits the fact that rotations can create dense, complex patterns when applied repeatedly. The pieces are defined not by their shape, but by their relationship to these rotational patterns, creating sets that have no ordinary geometric meaning. The paradox has profound implications for our understanding of space and infinity. It shows that our intuitive notions of size and volume break down when dealing with infinite complexity. In some sense, every point in space contains infinite information about its rotational relationships with every other point. Some mathematicians reject the axiom of choice, specifically to avoid paradoxes like this. Others embrace it, arguing that mathematical truth can be counterintuitive and that we shouldn't limit mathematics based on physical intuition. The paradox remains one of the most striking examples of how infinite complexity can lead to results that seem to violate basic logical principles. Welcome to level 67 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Zeno's dichotomy paradox. This paradox challenges whether motion is possible by arguing that you must traverse infinite distances to reach any destination. Zeno of Elea argued that before you can walk to a destination, you must first walk halfway there. But before you can walk halfway, you must first walk a quarter of the way. Before that, you must walk an eighth of the way, then a 16th, and so on. Since you must complete infinitely many tasks before taking your first step, Zeno concluded that motion is impossible. This seems absurd. We obviously can and do move. Yet the mathematical argument appears sound. To traverse any distance, you must traverse infinitely many smaller distances. How can you complete an infinite sequence of tasks in finite time? The paradox suggests that either our experience of motion is illusory or our understanding of space and time is fundamentally flawed. The modern resolution involves understanding infinite series. The distances 1, 2 plus 1, 4 plus 1, 8 plus 1, 16 plus form a convergent series that sums to exactly 1. Similarly, if each segment takes correspondingly less time to traverse, the infinite sequence of time intervals can sum to a finite total time. Calculus provides the mathematical tools to handle these infinite sums rigorously. But this resolution raises new questions. If space and time are truly continuous and infinitely divisible, then every motion does involve completing infinitely many tasks. How can finite beings accomplish infinite tasks? Some argue this shows that space and time must be discrete at the smallest scales, that there's a minimum distance and minimum time that cannot be subdivided further. Modern physics adds complexity to these questions. Quantum mechanics suggests that space and time might indeed be discrete at the Planck scale. But even if space-time is continuous, quantum uncertainty might prevent us from defining precise positions and trajectories in the way Zeno's paradox requires. While we have mathematical tools to resolve the paradox, it still raises profound questions about the fundamental structure of reality. Welcome to level 68 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the uncertainty principle. This paradox challenges whether we can ever have complete knowledge of physical reality by proving that certain pairs of properties cannot be measured simultaneously with perfect accuracy. Werner Heisenberg discovered that the more precisely you know a particle's position, the less precisely you can know its momentum, and vice versa. This isn't due to limitations in our measuring instruments, it's a fundamental feature of quantum reality. The universe itself prevents us from having complete information about quantum systems. The principle extends beyond position and momentum to other paired properties, like energy and time. You cannot measure both the exact energy of a system and the exact time when it has that energy. The more precisely you pin down one quantity, the more uncertain the other becomes. This creates a fundamental limit to knowledge that cannot be overcome by better technology or cleverer experimental techniques. This seems to violate our classical intuition that objects have definite properties independent of observation. A baseball has a specific position and velocity whether we measure them or not. But quantum mechanics suggests that particles don't have well-defined positions, and momenta simultaneously. These properties only become definite when measured, and measuring one property necessarily disturbs the other. The paradox deepens when we consider what this means for reality itself. If particles don't have definite properties before measurement, in what sense do they exist? Are we creating reality through observation, or merely revealing pre-existing but unknowable truths? Different interpretations of quantum mechanics give different answers to these questions. Some interpretations suggest that uncertainty reflects our ignorance about hidden variables that determine particle properties. But Bell's theorem and experimental tests have largely ruled out local hidden variable theories, suggesting that uncertainty is intrinsic to nature rather than merely epistemological. The uncertainty principle has practical implications for technology and measurement. It explains why atoms as stable electrons can't spiral into the nucleus, because that would require having definite position and momentum simultaneously. It also sets fundamental limits on precision in quantum devices and measurements. This paradox continues to influence physics, philosophy, and our understanding of the relationship between knowledge and reality. Welcome to level 69 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Infinite Hotel Paradox with a Twist. This paradox challenges our understanding of infinity by showing how an infinitely large hotel that's completely full can still accommodate more guests through counterintuitive room assignments. David Hilbert's original Infinite Hotel Paradox showed that a hotel with infinitely many rooms, all occupied, could still accommodate one more guest by asking everyone to move to the next room number. Room 1 moves to room 2, room 2 moves to room 3, and so on. This frees up room 1 for the new guest. But here's the twist. What if infinitely many new guests arrive simultaneously? Can an infinite hotel that's already full accommodate infinitely many additional guests? Surprisingly, the answer is yes, and there are multiple ways to do it. One solution involves asking all current guests to move to even-numbered rooms. The guest in room 1 moves to room 2, the guest in room 2 moves to room 4, the guest in room 3 moves to room 6, and so on. This frees up all the odd-numbered rooms for the infinite number of new arrivals. But we can accommodate even more complex scenarios. Suppose infinitely many buses arrive, each carrying infinitely many passengers. We now need to fit infinitely many infinite groups into our already full hotel. This seems impossible, but it can be done using the mathematical properties of infinite sets. We can assign room numbers using a systematic approach based on prime factorization. Each bus gets assigned a prime number, and each passenger on that bus gets assigned a power of that prime. The first passenger on bus 2 goes to room 219, the second to room 2 a quadrad, the third to room 2 cubic, and so on. Bus 3's passengers go to rooms 319, 3 quadrad, 3 cubic, and so forth. Since every positive integer has a unique prime factorization, every guest gets a unique room number, and no two guests are assigned to the same room. We've successfully accommodated infinitely many infinite groups in our previously full hotel. These solutions reveal counterintuitive properties of infinite sets. The paradox challenges our finite intuitions about space, quantity, and accommodation. It shows that infinity is not just a very large number, but a fundamentally different concept that operates according to its own peculiar logic. Welcome to level 70 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the quantum Zeno effect. This paradox challenges whether the act of observation can actually freeze quantum evolution preventing particles from changing states through the mere act of watching them. Named after the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno, this quantum effect shows that frequent measurement of a quantum system can prevent it from evolving. If you observe a radioactive atom often enough, you can effectively prevent it from decaying. The more frequently you check whether decay has occurred, the longer the atom remains in its original state. This seems to violate our intuition about observation. Usually, watching something doesn't prevent it from changing. Observing a pot of water doesn't stop it from boiling. But in quantum mechanics, measurement is an active process that disturbs the system being observed. Each measurement resets the quantum state, effectively restarting the clock on any ongoing quantum process. The effect occurs because quantum evolution is probabilistic and gradual. A radioactive atom doesn't suddenly switch from stable to decayed, gradually develops a probability of being in the decayed state. But measurement forces the atom to choose. It must be either decayed or not decayed, with no intermediate superposition allowed. If you measure the atom after a very short time, the probability of finding it decayed is extremely small. The measurement almost always finds the atom in its original state, which resets the probability clock to 0. By repeating this process rapidly, you can keep the atom in its original state indefinitely. This creates a paradox. The faster you try to detect change, the more you prevent change from occurring. It's like trying to watch grass grow. The more attention you pay, the less growth you observe, though for different reasons in the quantum case. The quantum Zeno effect has been experimentally verified with trapped ions, atoms, and other quantum systems. It has practical applications in quantum computing, where it can be used to protect quantum information from decoherence, and in quantum control, where it provides a way to manipulate quantum states through measurement alone. The quantum Zeno effect remains one of the most striking examples of how quantum mechanics defies classical intuition about observation and reality. Welcome to level 71 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the digital self. This paradox explores whether your online identity is more authentic than your offline self, questioning which version represents the real you. In our digital age, we curate our online personas through social media, creating versions of ourselves that may be idealized, filtered, or selectively presented. The paradox emerges when we consider that these digital selves often receive more attention, validation, and interaction than our physical presence. Some argue that our online behavior, freed from physical constraints and social pressures, reveals our truest desires and thoughts. Others contend that digital personas are artificial constructs that distort reality. The paradox intensifies when we realize that our digital traces may outlast our physical existence, potentially making our online selves more permanent than our biological ones. Welcome to level 72 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the liar's revenge. This paradox occurs when someone known for lying tells the truth, but nobody believes them, creating a self-fulfilling cycle of deception. Imagine a person who has built a reputation as a chronic liar. One day, they desperately need to communicate something truthful and important, but their history of deception has destroyed their credibility. When they speak the truth, everyone assumes they're lying and ignores or dismisses their words. This disbelief forces them back into deception, as the truth becomes functionally useless when no one will accept it. Society's justified skepticism becomes a trap that prevents redemption and perpetuates the very behavior it seeks to discourage. Welcome to level 73 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the hypergame paradox. This paradox challenges the very concept of games by asking whether a game that involves playing other games can coherently exist. The hypergame is defined as a game where players choose any finite game and play it, with the winner being whoever would win that chosen game. The paradox arises when we ask, is the hypergame itself a finite game? If it is finite, then It should be possible to choose the hypergame as the game to play within the hypergame, creating an infinite recursive loop. But if it's infinite, then it contradicts the rule that players can only choose finite games. It demonstrates how attempting to create a universal category that contains itself leads to logical impossibilities, revealing the limits of formal systems and the dangers of unrestricted self-reference. Welcome to level 74 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Observer's Dilemma. This paradox questions whether true observation is possible when the act of observing inevitably changes both the observer and the observed. In quantum mechanics, the observer effect shows that measurement affects quantum systems, but this principle extends beyond physics into everyday life. When we observe others, our presence changes their behavior, making natural observation impossible. When we observe ourselves through introspection, the act of self-examination alters our mental state, preventing us from seeing our unobserved selves. How can we gain true knowledge about anything if the very act of seeking knowledge changes what we're studying? The paradox suggests that pure, objective observation might be impossible. Welcome to level 75 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the memory erasure paradox. This paradox explores the logical impossibility of deliberately forgetting something while simultaneously remembering that you've forgotten it. If you successfully erase a memory, you shouldn't remember that the memory ever existed or that you erased it. But if you don't remember the erasure, how can you know it was successful? The paradox becomes more complex when we consider partial erasure. If you remember that you forgot something but can't remember what it was, does this count as successful or failed erasure? The situation becomes even stranger when we realize that to avoid relearning the erased information, you'd need to remember what you're supposed to forget, which defeats the purpose of erasure. This paradox reveals the interconnected nature of memory and consciousness, suggesting that complete selective amnesia might be logically impossible while maintaining a coherent sense of self. Welcome to level 76 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Forgotten Coin Flip paradox. This paradox asks whether a coin flip that no one remembers has a definite outcome, challenging our understanding of objective reality. Imagine a coin flip occurs in perfect isolation, with no witnesses, recording devices, or any way to determine the outcome. If everyone who could have known the result suffers complete amnesia, does the coin flip have a definite answer? From a physical perspective, the coin must have landed either heads or tails. But from an epistemic perspective, the outcome is unknowable and unverifiable. The paradox intensifies when we consider that the coin itself bears no memory of its flip, and the physical state that would indicate the outcome has been lost to entropy. This creates a tension between objective reality, the coin did land somehow, and subjective reality, no conscious entity can access this information. The paradox questions whether facts can exist independently of observation and memory, and whether information that cannot be recovered in principle should be considered real or meaningful. Welcome to level 77 of 100 paradoxes. Mathematics is supposed to be precise, logical, and free from contradictions. But what if infinity itself refuses to behave the way we expect? This is Skolem's paradox, a mind-bending problem in set theory that challenges how we understand numbers, size, and even reality itself. There is a concept called countable infinity. This is the kind of infinity that includes all the natural numbers for and so on forever. Even though this set is infinite, we can still list the numbers one by one. Then there is uncountable infinity, which is even larger. The real numbers, like pi, and irrational numbers, form an uncountable set, meaning there are more real numbers than there are natural numbers, even though both sets are infinite. Mathematician Georg Cantor proved this by showing that no matter how you try to list real numbers, there will always be some missing. So far so good. But here's where Skolem's paradox comes in. In formal logic, we can describe the set of real numbers using mathematical rules. However, a theorem called the Lovenheim-Skolem theorem says that if a mathematical system has an infinite model, then it must also have a countable model, one where everything still works logically, but the uncountable real numbers somehow behave as if they are countable. This leads to a paradox. 1. The real numbers are uncountable. This is a fundamental mathematical fact. 2. But Skum's theorem says that in some logical models, the real numbers can appear countable. 3. How can something be both countable and uncountable at the same time? This seems absurd if a mathematical structure proves that uncountable numbers exist. How can we also create a logical system where those same numbers appear countable? Skum's paradox forces us to ask if math itself can describe an uncountable set as countable. How much of what we believe about numbers is just a result of the system we use? Welcome to level 78 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the infinite shadow paradox. This paradox explores what happens when an infinite object casts a shadow, questioning whether the shadow maintains the same infinite properties. Consider an infinitely long, thin rod placed vertically in sunlight. The shadow it casts should also be infinitely long, but what happens when we examine the shadow's properties? If we rotate the rod slightly, the shadow's direction changes, but its length remains infinite. However, if we tilt the rod toward the horizontal, the shadow becomes shorter while remaining infinitely long in principle. The paradox deepens when we consider that the shadow is a projection of the infinite object onto a finite surface. Can a finite plane contain an infinite shadow? The shadow seems to possess the same infinite length as the original object, but its physical manifestation is limited by the finite surface it falls upon. This creates questions about whether infinity can be truly represented in physical reality. Welcome to level 79 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Forgotten Future Paradox. This paradox examines what happens when someone accurately predicts the future but then forgets the prediction, questioning whether the future remains determined. Imagine a prophet who makes an accurate prediction about a future event, but then suffers amnesia and completely forgets the prediction. If the prediction was truly accurate, the future should unfold as predicted, but now no one remembers what was supposed to happen. The paradox arises because the prediction's accuracy seems to depend on knowledge of it, yet the knowledge has been lost. Does the forgotten prediction still constrain the future, or does forgetting it somehow free the future from determination? This paradox explores the relationship between knowledge, memory, and determinism, questioning whether the future can be fixed independently of our awareness of its fixity. Welcome to level 80 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of omnipresence. This paradox questions whether being everywhere simultaneously is logically possible, or if it creates fundamental contradictions. If something is truly omnipresent, it exists at every point in space simultaneously. However, this creates several logical problems. First, if an omnipresent being exists at two different locations, are these the same entity or different instances? If they're the same, how can one entity exist in multiple places? If they're different, then the entity isn't truly unified and omnipresent. Second, omnipresence seems to require the entity to have contradictory properties simultaneously. It would need to be hot and cold, light and dark, existing in environments with mutually exclusive characteristics. Third, if the entity is omnipresent, does it exist inside itself? This creates a strange recursive situation where the entity contains itself infinitely. The paradox suggests that omnipresence, while conceivable as an abstract concept, may be logically impossible in reality. Welcome to level 81 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the immortality transfer paradox. This paradox explores what happens when an immortal being transfers their immortality to a mortal, questioning the nature of eternal life. Suppose an immortal being has the power to transfer their immortality to a mortal, but in doing so, they themselves become mortal. The paradox emerges. If the immortal being can die after transferring their immortality, were they ever truly immortal? True immortality should be impossible to lose or transfer, as it implies an eternal, unchangeable state. But if immortality cannot be transferred, then the being lacks the power to perform this transfer, which suggests they're not omnipotent. The paradox deepens when we consider what happens during the transfer. Is there a moment when both beings are mortal, or when both are immortal? Either situation seems to violate the conservation of immortality. Furthermore, if the newly immortal being can also transfer their immortality, then immortality becomes a transferable property rather than an inherent state, which contradicts the concept of eternal, unchangeable existence. Welcome to level 82 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Gettier problem. This paradox challenges the traditional definition of knowledge as justified true belief by showing cases where this definition fails. The classical definition states that you know something if you believe it, it's true, and you have good justification for believing it. However, Edmund Gettier presented cases where all three conditions are met, but we intuitively wouldn't say the person has knowledge. The Gettier problem reveals that true justified belief isn't sufficient for knowledge, but philosophers continue to debate what additional conditions are necessary. Welcome to level 83 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the forgotten dream. This paradox questions whether dreams that are completely forgotten ever truly existed, challenging the reality of unremembered experiences. Every night, we likely dream multiple times, but we forget most of our dreams completely. The paradox asks, if a dream is never remembered, did it actually occur? From a neurological perspective, brain activity during REM sleep suggests dreaming is happening, but if no memory trace remains, the dream experience seems to vanish from reality. The situation becomes more puzzling when we consider that the dreamer, upon waking, has no evidence that they dreamed at all. The forgotten dream exists in a liminal state between having happened and not having happened. The paradox suggests that memory might not just record reality, but actually participate in creating it. Welcome to level 84 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the Borel-Kolmogorov paradox. This paradox shows that probability can depend on how you frame the question, even when dealing with the same physical situation. Consider a random chord drawn on a circle. What's the probability that this chord is longer than the side of an inscribed equilateral triangle? The answer depends on how you interpret random. If you randomly choose 2 points on the circumference and connect them, you get one probability. If you randomly choose a point inside the circle and draw a chord through it perpendicular to a random radius, you get a different probability. If you randomly choose the chord's midpoint and draw the chord through it, you get yet another probability. All three methods seem equally valid for creating a random chord, but they yield different results. The paradox highlights fundamental issues in probability theory and shows that even seemingly precise mathematical concepts can be ambiguous without careful specification of underlying assumptions. Welcome to level 85 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the mere addition paradox. This paradox challenges our intuitions about what makes one world better than another by showing that adding happy lives can somehow make the world worse. Consider a world with 10 billion people living excellent lives. Now imagine adding 5 billion more people who live lives that are still worth living, but not as good as the original 10 billion. Intuitively, adding people with lives worth living shouldn't make the world worse, it's just mere addition. However, this creates a world where there's inequality between the original happy people and the new, less happy people. To improve this inequality, we might redistribute resources to make everyone equally well off, but this would make the originally happy people worse off. The paradox suggests that our moral intuitions about population ethics are inconsistent, and that determining what makes one world better than another is more complex than it appears. Welcome to level 86 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the timeless choice. This paradox explores what happens when someone must make a choice that exists outside of time, questioning whether choice is possible without temporal sequence. Imagine a being that exists outside of time and must make a choice that affects temporal reality. The paradox arises because choice seems to require a temporal sequence, first considering options, then deciding, then acting. But a timeless being experiences no before or after. All moments exist simultaneously for them. How can they deliberate when there's no temporal progression in their experience? If they make a choice, when did they make it? The choice would have to exist eternally, but then it wouldn't really be a choice in any meaningful sense. It would be more like a fixed property of their nature. Yet, if they cannot choose, they lack free will, which seems to contradict the power implied by existing outside time. The paradox suggests that free will might be fundamentally tied to temporal existence, and that timeless beings might be paradoxically powerless despite their apparent transcendence of normal limitations. Welcome to level 87 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the observer vanishing paradox. This paradox questions what happens to reality when the observer of a quantum system disappears, challenging the role of observation in determining reality. In quantum mechanics, observation appears to collapse wave functions and determine reality. But what happens if the observer suddenly ceases to exist while observing a quantum system? If the observer vanishes mid-observation, does the wave function collapse or remain superposed? The paradox becomes more complex when we consider that the observer's vanishing might itself be a quantum event requiring observation. Who observes the observer's disappearance? If no one observes it, does the observer exist in a superposition of having vanished and not having vanished? This creates an infinite regress of observers needed to observe observers. The paradox reveals potential problems with observer-dependent interpretations of quantum mechanics and raises questions about the fundamental nature of reality. It suggests that if reality depends on observation, then the stability of reality itself becomes questionable when observers are unreliable or temporary. Welcome to level 88 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Maxwell's demon with information loss. This paradox explores what happens when Maxwell's famous demon loses the information it needs to sort molecules, questioning the relationship between information and entropy. Maxwell's demon is a thought experiment where a tiny being sorts fast and slow molecules, seemingly violating the second law of thermodynamics by decreasing entropy without doing work. However, modern physics shows that the demon must store information about molecular speeds, and erasing this information creates entropy that preserves the second law. The paradox arises when we ask, what if the demon loses this information accidentally, through amnesia or damage? The paradox highlights deep connections between information theory and thermodynamics, and raises questions about whether information lost through amnesia or destruction follows the same thermodynamic rules as intentional information erasure. Welcome to level 89 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the observer-dependent causality paradox. This paradox explores whether cause and effect can change depending on who is observing them, challenging the objectivity of causality. In quantum mechanics, the order of events can appear different to different observers, especially when dealing with entangled particles and relativistic effects. But if causality is observer-dependent, we face a fundamental paradox. The same sequence of events could be cause, then effect for one observer, and effect, then cause for another. This creates logical contradictions about what actually happened. The paradox deepens when we consider that observers might disagree about whether a causal relationship exists at all. One observer might see random coincidence where another sees clear causation. The paradox suggests that causality, like time and space, might be relative rather than absolute, but this creates problems for logical reasoning and our understanding of how the universe works. Welcome to level 90 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the invisible gorilla. This paradox demonstrates how focused attention can make obvious things literally invisible, questioning the reliability of human perception and awareness. In the famous psychological experiment, participants watch a video of people passing basketballs and are asked to count passes. About half the viewers completely fail to notice a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene, even though the gorilla is clearly visible for several seconds. The paradox reveals that attention is not a spotlight that illuminates everything in our visual field, but rather a narrow focus that can cause us to miss dramatic and obvious events. This creates a fundamental problem. If we can miss a gorilla, what else are we missing? The paradox suggests that our sense of being aware of our surroundings is largely an illusion. We think we see everything important, but we're actually blind to most of what's happening around us. This raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness, the reliability of eyewitness testimony, and whether true situational awareness is possible. Welcome to level 91 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Fitch's paradox. This paradox shows that if all truths can potentially be known, then all truths are actually already known, challenging the concept of unknowable knowledge. The paradox begins with the seemingly reasonable assumption that every truth is knowable. That is, for every true statement, it's possible for someone to know it. However, Fitch's paradox proves that this leads to the conclusion that every truth is actually known. The proof involves considering statements like, P is true but unknown. If this statement is true, then it should be knowable. But if someone knows that P is true but unknown, then P is both known and unknown simultaneously, which is a contradiction. Therefore, there can be no true but unknown statements, which means all truths must be known. This paradox forces us to choose between believing that some truths are unknowable in principle, or accepting that omniscience actually exists. Welcome to level 92 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the ship of Theseus with quantum mechanics. This paradox combines the classical identity problem with quantum uncertainty, questioning whether identity exists at the quantum level. The classical ship of Theseus paradox asks whether a ship remains the same ship if all its parts are gradually replaced. Quantum mechanics adds new complexity. Particles are fundamentally indistinguishable and exist in probabilistic states. If a ship's atoms are constantly being replaced by identical atoms, and each atom exists in quantum superposition, what constitutes the ship's identity? The paradox deepens when we consider that quantum mechanics suggests particles don't have definite properties until measured. The paradox suggests that, at the quantum level, the very concept of persistent identity might be illusory, and that the ship of Theseus problem disappears because nothing has fixed identity to begin with. Welcome to level 93 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the reversed reality paradox. This paradox explores what happens when cause and effect are completely reversed, questioning the fundamental nature of temporal progression. Imagine a universe where effects precede their causes, where healing happens before injury, where sound travels before its source, where consequences determine their origins. In this reversed reality, the paradox emerges. If effects come first, what causes them to occur? The effect cannot cause itself, as it doesn't exist yet in the causal chain. But if something else causes the effect, then that something becomes the true cause, and we haven't really reversed causality. The paradox suggests that reversing cause and effect might be logically impossible, and that our understanding of time's arrow might be more fundamental to reality than we realize. It raises questions about whether temporal direction is a feature of the universe or a limitation of our perception. Welcome to level 94 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Tegmark's mathematical universe hypothesis. This paradox suggests that reality is literally mathematics, raising questions about the nature of existence and consciousness. Max Tegmark's hypothesis proposes that our physical reality is a mathematical structure, not that it's described by mathematics, but that it actually is mathematics. The paradox arises when we consider what this means for consciousness and subjective experience. If everything is just mathematical computation, then consciousness must also be mathematical. But how can mathematical relationships give rise to subjective experience? Why does being a particular mathematical pattern feel like anything from the inside? The paradox deepens when we consider that if all mathematical structures exist, then every possible universe exists, including ones where you make different choices. This suggests that all possible versions of you exist simultaneously in different mathematical structures. But if that's true, what makes your current experience special or real compared to all your other versions? Welcome to level 95 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the brain in a vat paradox. This paradox questions whether you can coherently doubt that you're a disembodied brain being fed artificial experiences, challenging the nature of knowledge and reality. The scenario imagines that you're a brain kept alive in a vat, with electrodes stimulating it to create the illusion of normal experience. Everything you think you know about the external world is actually artificial stimulation. The paradox emerges when you try to express this possibility. If you say, "I am a brain in a vat," what do your words refer to? If you really are a brain in a vat, then your word brain doesn't refer to real brains, which you've never encountered, but to simulated brains in your artificial experience. Similarly, vat refers to simulated vats. So when you say, "I am a brain in a vat," you're actually saying something like, "I am a simulated brain in a simulated vat." This raises profound questions about skepticism, reference, and the relationship between language and reality. Welcome to level 96 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called Wheeler's delayed choice paradox. This paradox suggests that quantum particles can seemingly change their past behavior based on future observations, challenging our understanding of causality and time. In John Wheeler's thought experiment, a photon travels toward a detector setup that can be configured to measure either its wave-like or particle-like properties. The key insight is that the choice of measurement can be made after the photon has already passed the point where it would need to decide whether to behave as a wave or particle. Experiments have confirmed that the photon's behavior seems to depend on the measurement choice, even when that choice is made after the photon has already travelled past the critical point. This creates a paradox. How can the photon's past behavior be determined by a future decision? The implications are staggering. It suggests that the present might be able to influence the past, or that the past remains undefined until observed. It raises profound questions about the nature of time and the role of observation in determining what actually happened. Welcome to level 97 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the unstoppable consensus paradox. This paradox explores what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, but applies it to decision-making and consensus building. Imagine a group that has committed to reaching consensus on every decision in ear. They will never stop deliberating until everyone agrees. Now suppose they face a decision where consensus is logically impossible, such as choosing between mutually exclusive options where members have fundamentally incompatible values. The paradox emerges. Their commitment to consensus prevents them from making any decision, but their commitment to making decisions prevents them from accepting the lack of consensus. They become trapped in infinite deliberation, unable to move forward, but also unable to abandon their process. The paradox deepens when we consider that the group might need to make a meta-decision about whether to abandon consensus, but this meta-decision itself requires consensus. The paradox reveals fundamental tensions in democratic decision-making and shows how procedural commitments can become self-defeating. Welcome to level 98 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of the observer's escape. This paradox questions whether it's possible to observe yourself escaping from observation, creating a logical impossibility around self-awareness and perspective. The paradox begins with the question, can you observe yourself from outside your own perspective? To truly escape observation, you would need to become unobservable, but if you're aware of your escape, then you're still observing yourself. The act of knowing you've escaped observation means you haven't escaped observation. The paradox suggests that total objectivity about oneself might be impossible, and that the observer and the observed might be inseparably linked in consciousness. It raises questions about whether true self-knowledge is possible, and whether there are fundamental limits to introspection. Welcome to level 99 of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the unobservable universe paradox. This paradox questions whether parts of the universe that can never be observed can be said to exist, challenging the relationship between observation and reality. Due to the expansion of the universe and the finite speed of light, there are regions of the universe that are causally disconnected from us. We can never observe them, communicate with them, or be affected by them in any way. The paradox asks, do these unobservable regions exist? If they have no possible impact on our observable universe, in what sense can we say they're real? Yet cosmological theories predict their existence based on the laws of physics observed in our region. The paradox deepens when we consider that these regions might have different physical laws or properties that we can never verify. How can we make meaningful statements about something that is in principle unobservable? The situation becomes even more puzzling when we realize that we ourselves are in the unobservable universe relative to some distant observers. If unobservable regions don't exist, then we don't exist from their perspective. The paradox suggests that existence might be relative to observation, but this leads to the uncomfortable conclusion that reality itself might be observer-dependent, and that vast portions of the universe might exist in a state of quantum superposition of existing and not existing. Welcome to the final level of 100 paradoxes. This one is called the paradox of everything. This final paradox questions whether a set that contains everything can coherently exist, and what it means for something to be truly universal. If there exists a set that contains everything, every object, every thought, every possibility, every paradox, every universe, what contains this set? If the set of everything is truly everything, then it must contain itself, creating a strange, self-referential loop. But if it contains itself, then it's both a member of itself and identical to itself, which seems to violate basic logical principles. The paradox becomes more complex when we consider that the set of everything must contain all possible sets, including the set of all sets that don't contain themselves, Russell's paradox. This creates immediate contradictions. Furthermore, if the set contains everything, it must contain all truths and all falsehoods, all possibilities and all impossibilities, all paradoxes and all resolutions. How can something contain contradictory elements? The paradox suggests that the concept of everything might be fundamentally incoherent, and that there might not be a meaningful universal category that encompasses all of reality. It implies that even our most basic concepts about totality and completeness might be logically flawed, and that the universe might be fundamentally partial and incomplete, rather than a unified whole. This final paradox brings us full circle, showing that even the concept of having solved all paradoxes creates its own paradox.